wish we had a media that hadn't been politicized, that was unbiased and reported the truth, instead of being a bunch of hate-mongering zealots.
I wish all Black lives matter, including mine.
These police officers were Black, and they were standing peacefully, silently, as they were being shouted at by white liberals.
Now festive, crowded, and peaceful, demonstrators pitching tents and planting gardens this weekend in the newly renamed Capitol Hill Occupied protest.
In the woods of Oregon, the final anti-government protesters occupying a federal wildlife refuge have surrendered to the FBI.
A 17-year-old called Kyle Rittenhouse has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for shootings that took place in Kenosha, Wisconsin recently.
I wish we could end bureaucratic bullying.
I wish that federal agents, bureaucrats, and officials could be held accountable when they do things like withhold exculpatory evidence in your federal trial.
I wish there was accountability for those that violate our due process, that have no regard for our civil rights.
You've done this to me and everybody. Seem like I denounce white supremacy, okay?
You did 2 days later.
White supremacy.
Not fair, sir.
Representative Riley,
our elected officials should be condemning.
I'm sorry, you're out of order.
In a statement announcing the charges, the St. Louis Circuit Attorney said it is illegal to wave weapons in a threatening manner at those participating in nonviolent protests.
I am not sad that a fascist died tonight.
It's a global pandemic.
Do the news. I'm begging you to do the news, Joseph.
It's a global pandemic.
I'm begging you.
Andy.
Please.
Whenever you have a different idea from what you're learning and what you're being taught is right and what is correct, I think that's whenever it's kind of like a mob mentality that these people have.
There's a lot of professors where it's actually advised, like, if you're conservative, do not take this professor. Like, you will either bite your tongue and write a bunch of stuff you don't believe in or fail the class.
The first day of their sociology course, the professor came in and said, if you're an effing conservative, you're not going to like me and you should probably drop the class now.
I wish there was more accountability with regards to the justice system, due process. I've been abused, and I know of others that have been abused.
I'm really afraid as a country we're starting to cheapen real hatred. We're starting to cheapen real racism. That really bothers me. And you know who wants that? The extremists want that.
Nobody wants to come forward. They're getting threatened. Their lives are getting ruined. I can't even get an actual job anymore.
I've been Black in America my whole life, all 30 years, and I can tell you that you guys have done the exact same thing every 4 years ahead of an election cycle, and it needs to stop.
I wish that one day we will overturn Roe versus Wade.
I wish that everyone could get along and be mature, responsible adults and work together regardless of their political views or opinions.
I wish people would ask the question, why? If people were to ask why more, they'd receive a better understanding of the convictions that people hold.
So could you tell us your name?
J. Morgan Philpott. I go by Morgan. I started practicing law in 2008. I'm a healthy person who would never contemplate suicide. in case anybody wonders if anything happens to me.
Are you going to agree? Our freedoms are waning and we'll lose our liberty, slipping one by one until there's nothing left to see. Are you willing to stand with me?
Chaos inside a federal courtroom as not guilty verdicts are handed down in the case of a wildlife refuge protest.
Not guilty, everybody!
All the U.S. Marshals attacked Mumford and throws him to the ground, and they took, there was like 8 of them on him, and they tased him.
So after the verdicts were read, the court said, hey, you're free to go.
but the marshals might have something to say about it. Yeah, they had surrounded me at that point, and so I just turned to them and I said, "Guys, show me what papers you have." And the next thing I know, they just had a hold of me, and then they were twisting my legs and put me to the ground, and then they tased me.
And when he gets surrounded by at least a dozen federal agents, he puts his arms up in the air and says, "What are you doing?" And they throw him to the ground.
And so they literally tased him, then they drugged me. It was interesting, they drugged me, they drugged my brother Ryan out, and they drugged David Fry. And David Fry had been acquitted on all charges and had no hold in Nevada, nothing.
If the jury just found me not guilty, how come they're still treating me as a guilty person, making me wear all these chains and stuff?
They literally beat him to the ground and handcuffed him and drug him down. Here he was, an acquitted man of all charges with no other charges on him.
They attacked me. They tackled me and threw me to the ground and put their knees on my back and all that, and as an innocent person.
And he still was transported in belly chains, handcuffs, leg irons.
I think what happened at the end is very symbolic of the inappropriate escalation of force by the federal government. For some reason, problems start to happen in the lives of people who are in that case. Marcus Mumford, for example. What happens to Rick?
Yeah, just moments ago, the jury of 8 men and 4 women found Rick Kerber, the free capitalist, guilty on 15 counts of securities and wire fraud, as well as money laundering.
You could say that they're not related, but it just becomes a little too coincidental when everybody who was involved in helping Ammon starts to get troubles in life that come from the government. Lavoie becomes the most salient example of what happens when the government becomes so systemically corrupt. Lavoie's death is not an isolated incident caused by 2 Oregon State troopers, although they did shoot him. That it is the manifestation, the result of a multi-year conspiracy by the government.
Are you just going to let it be? The ranchers are first, but brother, next it may be me. We all stand together or we'll hang separately. Are you going to that tree?
just after the first presidential debate, where Gabbard was the single most searched Democratic candidate, Google blocked her from being able to buy new ads.
The leftist mob comes and they destroy people's careers. It's effectively, we want you dead. We want you under a bridge somewhere. They're doing this with Gina Carano. So Lucasfilm, they fired Gina Carano from the Disney Plus, The Mandalorian is that show.
Yeah. GoFundMe has suspended a fundraiser established by conservative activist Candace Owens for a cafe co-owner who called the late George Floyd a thug.
The works of Theodore Seuss Geisel have come under fire for what some say are his racist and harmful depictions of certain groups.
The 6-page letter from the National School Boards Association compares parents who speak and act out at school board meetings to domestic terrorists.
The New Jersey Education Association has released an ad smearing parents as, get this, extremists.
So when extremists start attacking our schools, that's not who we are.
The rosary is now a symbol of extremism. Prosecutors called it a plot born of rage to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. But defense lawyers said the four were just big talkers, sometimes fueled by drug abuse, who were spurred on by no fewer than 12 undercover FBI agents and informants.
One of the largest things the FBI has ever had to endure on its not-so-spotless record was revealed in its entirety Thursday. A letter asking Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to kill himself, signed, sealed, and delivered by J. Edgar Hoover's FBI.
Nearly 4 years ago, a series of crimes were committed in full view of the public, and to date, no one has been charged. It was the one set of crimes inarguably committed during the course of Crossfire Hurricane. For America, those leaks are the centerpiece of one of the most remarkable crime sprees in our history.
I've witnessed a dramatic devolution in my industry as we've allowed ourselves to be transformed into tools of political and corporate interest, pushing narratives, slanting information on the news and online, and seeking to shape public opinion rather than report facts and various views.
You knew that federal prosecutors would start collecting crimes that they could use against parents. You knew they would advise state and local officials that these are all of the ways parents might be prosecuted. Parents like Scott Smith, who's behind me over my shoulder. This is a father from Loudoun County, Virginia. Here he is at a school board meeting. He was forcibly restrained. He was assaulted. He was arrested.
The Senate Revenue and Taxation Committee chair calling a recess because he declared the packed room disruptive. Then he had people removed.
A court has determined the FBI violated the law and constitutional privacy protections with some of its electronic surveillance activities.
Just as we were about to open the door, it flew open. They had used a ram to bust down my door.
The federal judge delayed Flynn's sentencing after accusing him of selling out his country.
Let me be clear that Floyd Corkins was responsible for firing the shot yesterday that wounded one of our colleagues and our friend Leo Johnson. But Corkins was given a license to shoot an unarmed man by organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center that have been reckless in labeling organizations hate groups because they disagree with them on public policy.
A Colorado judge ruled a baker violated the state's anti-discrimination law by refusing to make a cake for a transgender woman. The baker, Jack Phillips, previously won a partial victory at the U.S. Supreme Court in 2018 after refusing to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple.
Dr. Simone Gold was sentenced to 60 days in prison and 12 months of supervised release for illegally entering and remaining in the Capitol during the riot.
The first person to stand trial for his role in the January 6th Capitol insurrection was sentenced earlier today. Guy Reffitt.
We're going to begin with a news alert out of Washington tonight. Robert Palmer is now headed to prison.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce Mr. Eric Parker, just walked in. Could you please stand up? And I appreciate everything he's done for the citizens of Idaho and in Nevada.
Rancher Robert Lavoy Finicum was shot dead by federal authorities in Tuesday's standoff, the culmination of a weeks-long protest against federal control of land in Oregon.
35-year-old Ashley Babbitt becomes a martyr for a movement. The unarmed Air Force veteran from San Diego, California, was fatally shot.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
Welcome. I'm Mark Kerr, the president and co-founder of the Center for Self-Governance. CSG is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to answering 4 questions. What is self-governance? How do we self-govern? What is our system of government? And how can we work together to make it better? One of the waypoints on our journey takes us to April 12th, 2014. I was teaching a class in Scottsdale, Arizona, and my class on Saturday was canceled. One of the students heard that and said, hey, why don't you come with us to this nowhere place in Nevada for a rally between ranchers and the federal government over land conflict. I called CSG co-founder Michelle Perkins and asked for her permission. She did some research, called me back and said, absolutely, you need to go as long as you record it and remain safe. When I got there, it turned out to be one of the most epic days I have ever experienced in my life. I witnessed armed federal agents, snipers on a hill a mile away, angry protesters, and I was standing next to what I found out later to be a gentleman named Eric Parker. He lowered himself in the prone position, lowered his weapon between the concrete barriers on a bridge on I-15 in the middle of nowhere, Nevada. I stepped away 30 yards, got on my knee saying, these people are about to shoot each other. What have I got myself into? When I looked over the barrier, I saw a deputy sheriff come in the middle of these angry protesters and these well-armed federal agents. And from that point forward, it de-escalated. Everyone went home. No one died and nobody went to prison. I'm telling you, from my military experience, it should have gone the other way. Eric Parker is going to join us for a question and answer session at the end of this presentation. So you can take questions from the audience live and from those of you who are streaming across the nation all the way into Taiwan and Japan. Welcome. As I traveled with the clips in my training in leadership and self-governance classes, I was showing the clips to demonstrate the outcomes and how our system of government was functioning. Because in that moment, you had the federal government, local governments, protesters, media, regular passengers passing by. You had all of America in one spot. And you could see the government on video, not just in theory in a classroom. And so the students, as they were watching the clips from around the country, from New Jersey to California to Washington to Florida, were telling me, you need to turn it into a documentary. And I'm like, I don't even know how to spell the word. And so my wife, Pamela, introduced me to Jeremiah Loftus, who just graduated his master's degree in film. And so we approached Jeremiah, and Jeremiah, you decided to take on the Govern v. Governing series, part 1, the Bundy standoff. Did you know what you were getting yourself into?
Nope, not at all. Very little of it had actually made national news, and any news that did go out was like quickly glossed over, or it was of a single perspective that was just very dismissive, almost regretful in some ways that nothing bad happened.
Really?
Yeah.
I was completely shocked and like completely relieved, because you had snipers, you had angry protesters, you had people in the prone position. I was shocked that nobody died. When you made the film, what did you gain from? What did you learn from it that you didn't know before?
Well, probably, at least from the first documentary, I from all that research, what I learned was just how far our system has been changed or tweaked to where it's not operating the way it should be. There's something out of whack. There's something wrong with it. And then the other thing that I noticed was how far the media has become less of a spectator and more of a player on the political field, whether they would acknowledge it or not, which is, in my opinion, one of the big problems.
Wow. You know, while Jeremiah was making part 1, the Bundy standoff, some of the same characters went to Oregon and took a federal bird refuge over in the middle of, it's like in the middle of nowhere, Oregon, in 2016. And I thought to myself at that moment, I was like, this is not going to end the same way that 2014 ended, where everyone went home, nobody got arrested, nobody died. And the reason was because I could, from my personal perspective, it was an offensive position. And Center for Self-Governance we don't train people to take offensive political actions in that way. And so I was like, oh my goodness, someone's going to die. Someone's going to go to prison. So I approached Jeremiah and I said, you know what, when we get done with Bundy standoff, maybe we should make part 2 from the primary characters of this story, the Hammond family. Their story is epic. And they went to jail for the backburn and the long story. You can Google it. You can also watch our film, The Lavoie Dead Man Talking. But let me tell you how we got to Lavoie Dead Man Talking. 6 months later, I got a phone call from Jeanette Finicum, the widow of Lavoie Finicum. And she asked me if Center for Self-Governance would speak at his memorial. And that was a shock to me because we were very outspoken. We were like, we don't support offensive political action like that, taking over federal refuges. We didn't have a dog in that fight. You know what I mean? And so it turns out that one of our board members, Bill Norton, had been in contact with the Finicum family. And they themselves were new to this. Their husband, father, grandfather had just been killed. They weren't actively involved in politics. They didn't understand our system of government. And so they were seeking for answers. And so when I got permission from the Center for Self-Governance Board of Directors to take on this task, I went and I researched Lavoie Finicum's YouTube channel, 9 hours of video. I watched took literally hundreds of pages of notes about what he said and what he believed, what he was standing for. And anyway, so I got up to speak at his memorial in Salt Lake City. And the first thing I said, I'm reading my speech, I said, I love the federal government. We need the federal government. I'm not anti-government. And I kept reading my speech, but people got up and booed and people were rolling their eyes. And Jeanette Finicum and her 3 daughters were weeping. And at that very moment, as I was reading my speech, after all that effort, I realized the media had labeled this man a white supremacist, hate group, anti-government, domestic terrorist, right-wing extremist. And the supporters in the room were booing his very quotes that I was quoting. And the family was left picking up all the pieces. And so I came to Jeremiah, I said, Jeremiah, we should consider not doing this from the perspective of the Hammonds. We should do it. We have 9 hours of video. Let's let Lavoie, the dead man, tell the story himself. And that's what we embarked on. And it was 4 episodes. I mean, I can't believe you did it. That's for
9 hours compressed. I mean, it's more than 9 hours of just him, of his talk. It's a whole journey, which is a very rare opportunity when you see someone in historically who's had to confront government and lose his life, to have that rare aspect that he documented all the way, you know, from step 1 all the way to, in many ways, literally the last seconds of his life was documented. And that is,
it's unheard of.
It's unheard of.
What is your one takeaway from doing that? Because that was epic. I mean, 4 episodes of telling it from his perspective, of getting the interviews and all the things that were involved in that. What was your takeaway?
That one was even harder. And
you know, this is the second time you've sighed like that.
Yeah. That one was much harder because I kind of went through a lot of different stages, learning and understanding the events. And, you know, there's parts where I got really mad, frustrated at his loss, sad at it. And it kind of took the documentary one way. But then near the end, even listening to his own words, his family's testimony, etc., where the documentary ended up is almost being a study on the relationship between keeping our republic and human nature. Because it's not just Lavoie's human nature that's shown. It's the law enforcement, even the ones that ended up shooting him.
Right.
The media and those in charge. Because and that was another big pill for me to swallow, was to stop looking at government as just this big thing, you know, or just this big entity, you know. It's made up of
like Medusa.
Where it's like, well, the feds did this or the federal government did this. Well, it was individuals in the federal government, right? It was individuals in the state, and what were those people's motivations? You know, everybody up until that point, they all had a life. Nobody just walked on to the stage of Lavoie's life. You know, it all added up. And it was all like a butterfly effect. Every decision led up to those, you know, 3 shots.
Yeah.
And so who was ultimately responsible? I think the people who are ultimately responsible for that whole thing weren't there. They were somewhere else.
Yeah.
And those seeds had been sown years before Lavoie ever stepped out of that truck.
Wow. Great feedback. A couple things. One is, one of the members of the Finicum family is going to join us at the end of the premiere tonight for their question and answer panel session. Tawny Finicum, the daughter of Lavoie Finicum, she'll be joining us to answer any questions you have and to talk about it from the perspective of the Finicum family. I got to tell you, for me, doing both of those films, I never expected to do a documentary. Like I said, I don't even know how to spell the word. The second thing is that for me, teaching self-governance and our system of government, seeing the outcome in 2014 where nobody died, everybody went home, including the federal agents and so on and so forth. And then in Oregon, people died, people went to prison, lives were affected, families were picking up the pieces, all this stuff. It really warrants our conversation as a nation and a culture. What form of government and how do we want to be self-governing? It really warrants the discussion. And that's ultimately our burden at Center for Self-Governance. For those of you who are streaming live across the nation and even into Taiwan and Japan and here live and on Zoom, is that we would all be committed to be part of this conversation. Which form do you want to work? Where everyone goes home or someone dies and goes to prison? It's an amazing story. It's an amazing story. And it leads us to tonight's premiere of part 3, The Final Verdict. And The Final Verdict is a 3-part series on the trials of what happened after Lavoie was killed, who went to prison, what was the final verdict. It even includes the Finicum families and their wrongful death lawsuit. Tonight is episode 1, the Oregon trial. And I want to bring Zoe Warren in from South Carolina. Both he and Jeremiah are the directors of these films, and Zoe co-directed with me on part 1. And so Zoe, if you're with us, I just want to get your take on jumping in the Govern v. Governing series. And I watched you go through the same kinds of struggles that I saw Jeremiah go through as you made part 1. Can you share with us your thoughts on jumping into the Govern v. Governing series?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's an honor to be able to kind of share my experience with making such a difficult film. Number one, a lot of the information I was looking for, video and stuff, was flushed down the digital drain because it doesn't serve a narrative that's being pushed by the media and by a lot of political types. And so a lot of the stuff I was looking for, there were broken links and it just doesn't exist anymore, And so it was a bag of snakes that I had to straighten out. And there's so many interconnections between the prosecutors and the judges, and just there were so many connections, and I would call it corruption connections, to try to lay it out in a way so people could understand it, and they wouldn't watch this video and say, what just happened? No, that's impossible. There are so many things. I mean, just even Lavoie and how a lot of the Occupy protesters, the Occupy protest movement was in high gear. And this particular set of Occupy protesters was slammed as a bunch of stuff. And I didn't know if it was true or not. I'm separate from it. So I listened to all the testimony that's been recorded. I go back through all the records and I find that the guy that, is essentially the spokesperson for it is this massive teacher. And he's standing in the midst of people. Some of them may have anti-government ideas, but he's speaking a very pro-responsible government message and how we should relate to the government and law enforcement, how we should relate to one another, what it's supposed to be, right? And so he ends up, it's so crazy that the one who is the most, the perfect example of an American patriot who really wants government to work the way it's designed to work, is tired of trespasses, is the one that ends up losing his life in the whole ordeal. And granted, a lot of the guys who are involved also feel the same way. But the key is, I had a lot of experience with the militia movement because I did a documentary on a militia group called the Three Percenters. A Rise of 3 Percenters is the documentary. It was a 3% security force. But anyway, I found them to be a very attractive community. There was nothing that the media was saying about them was true. They weren't white supremacists. They weren't anti-government. And so moving into this, I was like, I'm really excited about trying to figure this out. And then I as I watch how they were treated in the courts, how they were treated by the judge, how they were treated by the prosecutors, how they were treated by the media, slimed as domestic terrorists, anti-government, and how they tried to withhold information from the jury in the courts. You know, it made me very upset. Every time I watch the video, I feel the exact same feelings I felt the first time I watched the clip, you know, because it's so meaningful. And so anyway, thank you for letting me kind of share my experience. I'm honored. I feel like this is a movement to bring about what I would consider like God's judgment on wicked institutions, so that they change. Not that they don't have to be destroyed, they just need to be changed. You know, the fire of God's judgment can change things. It changes, transforms things. And so hopefully we are in the queue to help transform things in the American criminal justice system. So that's my take.
No, thank you very much, Zoe. It's been great to have Jeremiah and Zoe on this project, especially since 2015 is when we approached you. My goodness, we're going on 7 years. Lots has happened in those 7 years, and so what we're going to do is I'd like to ask. I'm going to come back to Zoe, and I want to ask these two gentlemen 2 questions. Same question we're going to ask the panelists at the end of the film. And so Zoe, if you could hop back on, we want to ask you the following question. Now that you've seen the stories in part 1, the Bundy standoff, part 2, Lavoie Dead Man Talking, those 4 episodes, and now we're journeying into part 3, the final verdict, what happens in the criminal justice system? Zoe, I'd like to ask you, as someone who is steeped in this, like, what do you hope, or what do you expect to accomplish or to see happen with this telling of these stories?
Well, you know, my hope is so much of what the protesters, once they were arrested, even before they were arrested, really, but so much of what they experienced in the courts and while detained could have been circumvented before they even went to jail at all. Because right now we have a prosecution side and a defendant side. I feel like the government should not be a party. Like they were harmed by people, you know. That's not really real, you know. That's a fiction. The government wasn't harmed by anyone. We don't need a prosecutor. We need an advocate on the government side and an advocate on the citizen side, fighting for what's true. And so the advocate, if we can just change the perspective, change the motivation of our legal people. If their perspective isn't, I need to make prosecution so that I can be the best prosecutor, so I can be, you know, #1 prosecutor with 98% of my cases I get prosecuted and I win. No, listen. If we had an advocate, then anytime you find information that would exonerate the citizen, you give it, because we should honor that. It should be an honor system. Like, no, listen, great. We really just wanted to get to the truth. We found it. Here it is. So that way there's advocacy on both sides. It's not about trying to, like, you know, get away with crimes or convict for the sake of having a good record of convictions. It's about what is true. It's about real justice. And so if this work that we're doing could have any effect, I would love for it to have the effect of, you know, if I had my way, I could do anything I wanted. I would love to be able to change the justice system to the effect where there's advocates on both sides, advocates for the citizen. Because at the end of the day, the government's not harmed by people, you know, camping out at a bird refuge that was empty. The government's not harmed because they broke some fences. I mean, the citizens are harmed, and they're harmed even if you get sued, because if you sue the government, you're suing me. I got to pay for it too. So it's always us. So anyway, that's what I would like to see.
Thank you, Zoe. I'm going to turn it over to Jeremiah here in a second, but I'll let you know that Zoe's going to hop off and get ready to stream episode 1, the Oregon trials of the final verdict, Govern v. Governing series, part 3. Jeremiah, you've been involved now in all 3 parts of the Govern v. Governing series. What do you hope to see come from telling these stories?
Well, I would point to 2 main subjects. One is more general, one's more specific. For the more specific one, I've seen a real harm come from private prison institutions. And I feel like that has become a mechanism by which the American people are suffering. And I would say that's not fair to any American. That's not fair to the American taxpayer. And I would also say that's not even fair to law enforcement. because, law enforcement, the majority of law enforcement really do want to protect their community. They want to be there to keep the community from suffering, whether chaos, oppression. And I feel like that's an area where people don't always see it, but it's become more of a money-making institution. And then in general, I would hope that one of the things people take away from this is that you can't keep the republic unless you know what it is to begin with, unless you understand it. We can say keep the republic, and that means, that just means voting for a certain candidate, or that means, taking a stand or going to a protest, etc. That could be a part of it, but that's not the main thing. And we keep the republic because it's our responsibility, not whoever we elect. And we keep it by first knowing what it is, just like a mechanic. You can't fix something if you don't even know where to start, right? So where I hope people take from this to encourage them, understand what we have, go back to the source, which is the Constitution, and then look at the system we have now and look at the difference. There's the problem, fix it.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I wanted you guys to know that at the end of the premiere, which will be starting here in just a second, we're going to have panelists from tonight's film. Morgan Philpott, an attorney attached to some of the defendants that were found not guilty. We have Ryan Payne, who is one of the individuals in the car with Lavoy Finicum. He got out at the first stop. And then we have Jason Patrick. He was also one of the defendants from the Malheur Wildlife Refuge. And so if you're interested in any of those topics, the Bundy standoff, Lavoy Dead Man Talking, you can find those films on our YouTube channel, our Vimeo On Demand channel. You can also go to onecowboystandforfreedom.com. That is the Finicum family website, and learn more about those details there.
Hey, Mark, before you
Yes.
move on, we also have Dwayne Emer.
Oh, Dwayne Emer's joined us. He was the gentleman who rode his horse to prison over 1,300 miles, rode his horse to prison from Oregon down to California. So we have 4 panelists from tonight's film. We have Tawny Finicum representing the Finicum family, and she's tied to episode 3, the wrongful death. And then we have Eric Parker from the Nevada trials. And Zoe and Jeremiah, one last question for you guys before we start. And I'm sorry I forgot about this. Is what is the production schedule that you guys have in mind for the completion of episode 2, the Nevada trial, and episode 3, the wrongful death lawsuit?
As for episode 3, which is about the wrongful death suit, technically speaking, the documentary, the history that's covering is not even done yet.
Yeah.
And it will be concluded this year. So essentially, whatever the outcome is, that is what our ending will be.
That's the final verdict.
We're kind of living it right now.
We are.
And then as for 2,
We'll defer to you, Zoe. In terms of episode 2, the Nevada trial, I'm assuming that's something that will be, we're looking forward to seeing this year or next year. Do you have an estimation?
Yeah, hopefully it will be completed by the winter of 2023 and 2024. I guess that's the beginning of the year in 2024. Although there are some things that we have to solve, like obviously we have to have funding and stuff. And so with that said, the more funding we have, the faster we can do it. And so hopefully we'll be able to get all the fundraising done so that we can get it done. And it will be amazing to be done with it before October, but that will be really, really ambitious. So
That's right. Well, it's part of the process of telling the story is having the resources to do that. One of the things I wanted to let everybody know too is that Zoe has come on to Center for Self-Governance to be our political weaponization of label coordinator. He has been amazing at getting us connected to Congress, all the way down to city councilmen. The very first city council in the United States is forming an ad hoc committee to study the political weaponization of label, and it's coming right from the state of Washington. Exciting news. Domestic terrorism language across the United States to add checks and balances. Hopefully some of those bills are going to be called the Lavoy Finicum Act. We'll see what happens, but stay tuned to centerforselfgovernance.com for all the details about when these films come out. Okay, with that, enough said. After the film, we'll have a Q&A with those panelists from the 3 films. But right now, I'd like you to sit back, and I would love for you to carefully consider joining us along the pathway to self-governance to discover what self-governance is and how we can all work together to make it better. With that, please enjoy part 1, the Oregon Trials.
As they pulled in behind Lavoie's truck, and they started, lasers were all over the windows from their rifles.
Ryan rolls down his window, Ryan Payne. He rolls down his window, he puts his hand out the window, and boom!
Immediately a shot went off and he jerked his hands back in.
I had stuck my hands out the window and my head. One of the lasers happened to hit me in the eye, which caused me to jerk my head and everything back inside. And right then a shot was fired.
We're going, they're shooting at us, what the heck?
Then Ryan Payne did get out.
He exits the vehicle quickly. He jumps out of the vehicle and throws his hands in the air. He yells, "There's women in the vehicle." That's what he yells, "There's women in the vehicle."
Obviously they're here for blood. Obviously they've made the decision to kill. So I'm gonna give them what they want.
I've counted the cost, and I'm willing to pay it.
Okay, we're here. Go ahead and shoot me. Stand. Trying to. Stay down. Stay down. Stay down. Stay down. Stay down. Shoot me. You have to shoot me. Damn it. Are they shooting him? Did they shoot him? You asshole. Oh my God! Okay. Stay down.
I can't
Is he dead? Don't get out. I am EMT! Stop it.
Are you hit?
No, oh, hold on. Don't do it. Hey, they're shooting. Don't do anything. Go to bed. Where the hell is Lavoie? Down.
I can't see.
Shut up. Stay down, Ryan. Stay down. Stay down.
The FBI, with our partners, took the first steps to bring this occupation to a conclusion. We worked to ensure that we could do so peacefully and safely, out of harm's way of the citizens here in the county.
A deadly turn of events sparking even more distrust between the FBI and a group of angry militiamen in rural Oregon. One rancher killed and conflicting eyewitness accounts.
As the Bundys were on their way from Burns north to John Day for a discussion about property rights and the federal government. Well, they never got there.
It's time for everybody in this illegal occupation to move on.
I believe Lavoie Finicum was murdered.
The FBI and local police won't explain how it all happened or even name Finicum as the man killed by police gunfire. Robert Lavoie Finicum, a rancher turned malicious spokesman.
We had these same problems in Utah and in Nevada.
59-year-old Shauna Cox from Kanab is one of at least half a dozen people arrested in Oregon.
We need you to get here and stand with us. Whether you're armed or unarmed, you get up here.
They're calling Lavoie a hero in the Patriot movement. His picture now spreading online. Wrongfully taken out, they say, by overly aggressive law enforcement.
I'm asking the federal government to allow the people at the refuge to go home without being prosecuted. To those remaining at the refuge, I love you. Let us take this fight from here. Please stand down. Please stand down.
Are you going to agree? Our freedoms are waning and we'll lose our liberty. Slipping one by one until there's nothing left to see. Are you Are you willing to stand with me?
After the tragic death of Lavoy Finicum, the Oregon protesters are rounded up and rushed off to Portland jails. They will be brought here to a federal court of law where they will receive the final verdict. Hi, I'm Mark Kerr with Center for Self-Governance, and this is Governed v. Governing.
So in the van was myself, Ryan Payne, Buddha Cavalier, Mark McConnell, Shauna, and Victoria. Ryan was shot. He was shot in the arm. He literally had a bullet in him, and they took him to the hospital. And so he was not transported in the same vehicle that we were transported in.
You know, run a few x-rays and stuff, decided I wasn't hurt that bad, and then they, you know, moved me out in convoy or out to where the others were at a rest stop between Burns and Band.
So then we go to Burns, and we go by the hospital, and we pick up Ryan. Then we go out to the, it's like a rest stop outside of Burns, and that's when they brought in all the vehicles. There are a whole bunch of dark-colored, like SUVs, different vehicles, and they take us all out, and they put us in these separate vehicles. And that's when they put the chains on us, and we have the leg irons.
And so now that we're all together there, then they motorcade all the way to Portland, and they literally go 100 miles an hour the entire way, through towns and everything, just the whole lineup of High Patrol, Oregon State Police, and just flying down the road.
I said, so it's okay if you guys just go in a caravan and travel through the towns at this high rate of speed? You don't slow down for anything, no stoplights, no nothing, they just barrel them through town. Of course, they didn't answer me.
My name is Dwayne Emer, and I'm a defendant in the Bundy case. We've been up for 2 days after they shot Lavoy, and I was trying to open up a dialogue of communication with the FBI because we were told that we were going to be shot on sight. Hi, I love you, my beautiful wife, and my beautiful daughter, Rebecca. I knew we had men on the ground wanting to come in and kill everybody. Make sure you tell my daughter why I died.
I am Rebecca Emer, and the daughter of Dwayne Emer. He was the guy on the horse with the flag at the refuge in 2016. We had to do news reports in 6th grade on everything, and it was all over the news. And Dad's picture was the front headline, and I was like, wow, that's my dad. And then everybody was making fun of me for it. Oh my God, what is he doing? He looks like an idiot. She's related to that guy. And then my teachers were like weird, and they didn't want to talk to me, or they would just treat me differently from all the other kids in class.
I made me the guinea pig and filmed and live streamed my exit from the refuge. When I was in the service, I was exposed to a Bosnian-style checkpoint, and it was the same exact checkpoint that we use overseas. And I had to physically take off my clothes, and they said, drop your drawers, even your underwear, out in the snow and the cold. This is just normal war-style checkpoint. Take off your boots, take off your socks, take off your underwear, and then they clear you when they're fit and ready for you to put your clothes back on. It was to degrade you, to mentally degrade you, and make you submissive.
You know, I didn't really feel comfortable turning myself in.
And so here I am, I'm all boogied out, ready to go, and you guys are gonna watch me die live on defend your base.
I didn't know what's going to go on, behind the jail walls. I've heard stories, and of course, a lot of the social media people were talking about how we're all going to get raped and all that stuff. So I wasn't really quite comfortable turning myself in.
Unless my grievances are heard, I will not come out.
David, they're hearing. It's all right. They're hearing. The whole world's hearing. You got 20,000 people hearing. Just go ahead and go out.
I had 2 cell phones in my hand. I had the one from the FBI and the one that I was using to talk with Gavin Syme as he's live streaming the whole thing.
Go on, David. We've got this, man. Stop on the phone!
It's Christiane Paul talking on this side, and the FBI is telling me and stuff on this side.
If everybody says hallelujah, I'll come out.
Of course, I had asked the FBI, to say the hallelujah, and I would come out.
Say hallelujah! So I'm walking towards them right now.
Okay, stay fine.
I want to tell you, David. Keep walking, my friend. Hallelujah.
And then we started walking up the hill towards the front gate, and that's where Michelle Fiore and Franklin Graham was. And they let me go over and talk to them, and they said prayers. They had put their arms around me, and they said some prayers, and telling us we're going to be fine. And they put me in a vehicle, and that's when they took us all to this little base. It's like a little FBI base that they had, and that's where they searched our, patted us down and made sure we didn't have any weapons. And then from there, they transported us to Portland.
They transport us to Portland in the Multnomah County jail system.
And let me tell you, when we came into Portland that night, it was the biggest parade you ever saw. We had sirens everywhere, lights, sirens. It was like we had a huge parade, and they had everybody. They shut down all the streets, put all the red lights on. They had armed guards up and down the streets. When we came in that van, it was unreal. I mean, in our caravan. It was unreal. I've never seen anything like it. It was like, we must have been like serial killers, I mean, it was almost hilarious.
So I was placed in a medical unit because I'd been shot, which was better than the others went to. They all went to segregation, to the hole, they call it.
We got into the bed about around 4 o'clock, probably 3:30, 4, I don't remember exactly, after they booked us in. And then they took me into the cell. Then we were only there for a couple of hours, and then they get up and they do the mug shots, and they did all, and it was ridiculous.
But everything's just concrete floors, concrete walls, steel doors, small rooms.
They put us in a tremendous amount of stress and tremendous amount of, we were isolated. Up there, we couldn't even talk to each other, see each other. They didn't ever let us even be anywhere close to each other whatsoever at all.
Just simple, your liberty being taken away is enough to crush you.
The very first day, they take us to this jail. They asked us to strip.
They strip search you all the time. It's not happening.
And I had refused at first, and this big guy, a really overweight guy, he started getting ready to beat me up, it looks like.
They treat you as though you're guilty.
And I was like, all right, fine. So I was like, all right, whatever. So I started taking off my clothes, and then, they're all laughing and stuff.
I'm not going to allow them to treat me like I'm guilty when I know I'm not. I'm not going to help them to pretend that I'm guilty.
People who are arrested and thrown into jails, and this is how we were treated, this is how I was treated, they treat you as though you're guilty.
So I began to say things like this: look, I'm not going to strip search, and I'm not going to participate in strip searches anymore, right? And I go, I can't stop you from forcing me, because you can get 5, 6, 7, 8 guys if you want, or 10 guys, which they did at one time. You know, you can strip my clothes off me and do what you want to me. I can't stop you from doing that, but I'm not going to take my clothes off for you and do the things you want me to in front of you. I'm not going to do that.
And whether it's guilty of one crime or another, or whether they treat you all the same, they're all treated terribly.
Nobody is treated like an innocent in the system. You're in irons and shackles, and you're put into a humanly demeaning situation. Society may look at that and see the people in the jumpsuits and the shackles and, you know, with your wrists tied to your ankles and all this other stuff that they do, and go, well, these are dangerous people.
And I had such a confidence that what I was doing was right and that I was an innocent man that I wouldn't yield. And so it just got worse and worse and worse, and I spent all that time in solitary confinement. You know, they beat me up, they stripped me, they, you know, damaged my hip, broke my teeth, blew my eardrum. All those things were going on because simply I would not submit to them. And they literally wanted to break my spirit. And I wasn't going to let them, and I knew what I was doing was right.
You know, those jailers are just big dummies who do what they're told. They do what they're told, they do what they're told. They're just men who do what they're told.
Oh, the prison food is pretty awful.
The food is absolutely terrible. I couldn't even eat for 2 or 3 days until I finally got hungry enough to be forced to consume their garbage.
I talked to Ryan Bundy. He said he thought it was bone meal. He swore up and down that it was like bone meal.
They had to train somebody to make it that bad. Nobody can make food that bad by accident. It seriously is that bad.
It was gray, and when you open it up, it was purple inside, and so it's absolutely awful.
The best I could describe it is like slop. It's just like slop. And, you know, like the meat is like bone meal. I mean, that's, you know, if you want to call it meat. I wouldn't call it meat, but it's bone meal, and it's just this ground up mush of probably everything that no one else will eat.
No.
And one of the inmates that worked in the kitchen said that several of the boxes that come in say inmate consumption only. And it's just...
You hear that?
It's horrible. Horrible.
They put me in solitary confinement, and I noticed that there was feces on the wall. This is in violation of Oregon law that, you know, they can't be put in any of these rooms where there's feces everywhere. And so I had told people about that, and the outside people would call the guard, you know, I guess the warden or whatever. They would complain and saying that they're putting me in unsanitary conditions. And they said, well, they would accommodate me with another room. And they ended up taking me down to this dungeon. Basically, it's like the dungeon of this jail. It's where the worst of the worst go. We're talking absolutely the worst crazy people, where they really throw everywhere. They opened up this little unit block, and the first thing you notice is the smell. Out of this unit block, the smell of feces and urine is horrible. It's strong smell. And they throw me in there. And inside this, it's like a little small hallway, and there's like four cells, and I'm on like the very end cell, or second to the end. And as soon as you go in there, you notice there's feces all over the wall. In the the hallway, there's feces on the wall there. There's feces on the ceiling. And they open up my door, and there's feces right by the bed that I'm supposed to sleep at. And there's feces on the toilet on the side of it. And so they had told outside people that they put me in a better room, and here they put me in even a worse situation. And one of the guards came up to me and started laughing and said that I need to cover up the bottom of my cell door, the gap, because the guy over to the end over here, he's going to start trying to fling underneath that door into my room.
And then they gave us an attorney. And when the attorney handed me the piece of paper, it was the charges. And at the very beginning, and I have these original ones, but at the beginning it said that it was the United States versus Ammon Bundy, all in capitals, Ryan Bundy, all in capitals, Ryan Payne, Shauna Cox, Brian Cavalier. I didn't even know that was Buddha's name. I didn't know who Brian Cavalier was. John Ritzheimer. I said, he's in Arizona. Why would he be on there? And then they had Joseph O'Shaughnessy, and I said, Santilli? I mean, I never saw Joseph O'Shaughnessy there. And Santilli, he's media. Why is he on here?
My wife had received a phone call from a detective here in Peoria.
Another occupier, John Ritzheimer, was arrested in Arizona. He had just returned home to see his family.
I remember the feds taking me to the FBI headquarters over here in Phoenix, and I just had nothing to say to them.
I was released after 3 days, okay? I was released after 3 days. That was a miracle. They said nobody was going to be released.
I was held down here in Phoenix for about a month under the wonderful Sheriff Joe Arpaio and his absolute inhumane facility.
And they gave me somebody else's clothes. They opened a door, and there's all these cubicles that have all these different clothes rolled up and stuck in them, kind of like a thrift store.
And I was extradited up to Oregon, and that's also when I really got a taste of what life is going to be like on the terrorist watch list.
So now I have none of my stuff, no ID, no money, no wedding rings, no anything, not even my own clothes, and they pushed me out the door.
They pulled me off the bus first, and they made me stand out on the cold tarmac, and all the other inmates and stuff were handcuffed, and they had shackles on their ankles. And then they did what's called black box. They black boxed me, and they put this black box on your handcuffs so that they can't move at all. And then they put a belly band around you, and they lock you up right there on your waist, so you can't scratch your face, can't scratch your head or anything. It's a really miserable way to be shackled and cuffed. And then I had to be the last one to board the plane. And as I'm boarding the plane and I'm cuffed and I'm coming down the aisle, and all these actual hardened criminals are looking at me like I'm the crazy guy. The only thing missing on me was the Hannibal Lecter mask.
I spent 2 weeks in jail, and I was released from the judge. The FBI could not show anything saying that I was dangerous. So the judge released me back to my house. The most disturbing thing the FBI could find against me is I do that competition sword fighting, and they used a picture of me fighting in front of a crowd of kids in full plate armor to show how dangerous I was, with the kids in the background of it. The judge laughed it out of the courtroom and released me.
My brother and I, Ryan, was down the lower levels of the federal building in Oregon. Judge Jones came down there. He was over the release of us. None of us have been released, and we're wanting to be released. We're actually getting ready to have a release hearing. And here he comes down to the lower levels of the federal building into the dark dungeon, right? With the concrete walls and the steel and the doors and all that. And he comes in. They bring a chair in, and Judge Jones sets, he's in our cell, in our holding cell, right? And it felt like he wanted to, it felt like we were the elephant men, you know, and he wanted to come see the elephants in the cage, you know, kind of, I don't know, it was really strange. Like somehow he wanted to witness us there. So that was strange in itself. I mean, he's a federal district judge. He was been a judge for like 30 years or something like that. And now he's on, emeritus status, and so he only does a little bit of stuff. Well, we took the opportunity, I was like, let's take the opportunity to try to show him that we're normal people with families and that we're suffering. Our families are suffering, and that we need to be released to go home so we can go home to our families. And even if we still had to fight this case, at least we could do it at home, And we began to share with him some kind of this, and he got really nervous about us getting personal with him, right? Really nervous. And then he had this sheet, he had this paper in his hand, and he goes, well, let me see here. And he goes down, and Ryan was on the list first, and I was kind of sitting to the side, and I got to see that list, and it was a list of all the defendants in both Nevada and Oregon. And off to the side, there was some color coding. There was red, green, and yellow. And he went down that list, and he went to Ryan's name, and he goes over to the color, and he goes, oh, I can't release you. You can't be released. It shows here that you can't be released. And he goes down to me, and he does the same thing. I can't release. This was before a release hearing. And so someone was telling him, in some way manipulating him, whatever the situation was, I don't know. But there was a list that was telling that federal district judge whether we could be released or not. Now, what's the point of having release hearings and trials and, evidence and witnesses and all of that when it's already predetermined? And who gave him that list?
And if you look at who was indicted, it was the Bundy family and mostly anybody that was a militia or an or a veteran, okay? Veterans, anybody that will take a stand that has the knowledge of the capability of using a weapon.
I mean, hearing the news, how they were being portrayed throughout this whole process before they were arrested, oh, these militia guys are just, these militia terrorists are coming in, and you just painting to be something that they completely were not.
What did we do? We went into a refuge in protest for what they are doing to the agricultural community, especially the Hammonds, by putting them in prison for 5 years. That's what we did, right? We didn't threaten anybody, we didn't hurt anybody, we didn't damage anything, and this is how they react.
The prisoners were grouped into tiers for their subsequent trials. Did the prosecutors and judge do this for courtroom efficiency or political strategy?
Just the trip from the jail to the courthouse, which was next door, 1 block, but the marshals had shut down 3 city blocks, lined the streets with men with high-powered rifles, just so that we could move 1 block from the jail to the courthouse. It was ridiculous. And they did this every time we transported.
It was just a continual escalation because they, I think they even talked about it. I know the marshals were involved in it as well, the U.S. Marshals, who are the ones that oversee and basically are the authority over these pre-detention prisons. I know that they were, spoke about it. There was communication about basically teaching us a lesson.
Again, this whole innocence until proven guilty just wasn't there. I mean, they push you around, force you against the walls, make you put your nose up against everywhere you go. So they don't want you to face them. You're not good enough. You're less than they. And speaking of the marshals, and they want absolute control over you. You're in leg shackles, shuffling around, and those shackles hurt. They dig into your ankles. They hurt.
And that's sort of the apologetics that I was playing there, right? Like, well, there are perspectives that allow for that to be okay.
But it's not.
But you can also see that when somebody is innocent and they enter into this system, well, I'm in shackles and I'm being forced to do everything. I'm taken from my family situation. certainly there's no innocence. And then you're put into the populations with all the people who are, some of them are guilty, some of them are not, some of them are going to trial. You just don't know.
And you're in handcuffs behind your back, and yet they still push you and shove you around. Make you force you to have your nose pointed to the wall everywhere you stop. Of course, when you go into the courtroom, before you get there, the marshals all go and change into suits and ties. So they take all their tactical gear off so that in the public eye, they look like, oh, they're all just nice guys.
You have the theater, and the courtroom is a beautiful theater. I think even attorneys understand themselves to be partaking in a theater of sorts. You have this beautiful facade of due process taking place. But behind closed doors, when that all ends, right before you come into that facade, they take off all your shackles. You're no longer this criminal that you've been treated the entire time. So there's the presentation to the public, and even the judge. Is the judge aware of what's going on in the prison system and with the transport and everything else? We discussed many times that attorneys and judges and probably federal officers, they should all have to do some amount of time. They should all be required to be in that system for a period of months just to give them some empathy.
Hi, this is Morgan Philpott. In about 2016, I became the attorney for Ammon Bundy because of circumstances in Nevada and Oregon. My introduction into the case came because I had been working with a man named Rick Kerber. And Rick, his attorney at that time, was a man named Marcus Mumford. And Marcus was an exceptional trial attorney. I would say probably the best I have ever known. Rick and Marcus made a mean team.
And helping on the legal defense team for Ammon Bundy up in Oregon for the Malheur Wildlife Refuge case. Morgan Philpott, another dear friend of mine, and Marcus Mumford and I.
In Oregon, we took more of an offensive position.
And we feel that we have exhausted all prudent measures and have been ignored. And it has been left to us to decide whether we allow these things to go on or whether we make a stand so they will not happen to other people across this country.
You know, we actually felt like we had to, or at least me, and I'm just going to speak to me, I felt like I had to do something to stop what was happening to people like the Hammonds.
It's not about me. It's about America.
And in Oregon, although there was a tremendous amount of lies, we just felt all we had to do is get in front of the jury of why we were there, what we were doing, and what was the truly intent of our hearts.
Only 6 other defendants would go to trial with Ammon, and with the ideas that Marcus and Rick and I had come up with for their defense. Now what's funny is I'm sitting in this meeting of attorneys and we bring up the adverse possession defense.
We're going to stay here until we have secured the land and the resources back to the people of Harney County.
Constitution.
That building is the people's building.
The first thing that every law school student learns, and this is why it just, you know, I don't blame these attorneys for rejecting the concept, right? Because every law school attorney learns you cannot adversely possess land from the government. And yet here we are saying we want, as part of our defense and strategy, adverse possession, which anybody in their right mind would immediately reject if you've been to law school.
One of the things that adverse possession requires is for you to take claim of it and also improve it and then beneficially use it. One of the things that we intentionally were doing and we were documenting was doing improvements.
It's very important that we try to keep things neat, tidy, preserve it so that nothing is destroyed.
These crimes that they're being charged with are crimes of intent. And if your intent is not to commit a crime, but is to go and adversely possess land, even though you legally can't do it, then your intent is not to commit a crime, it's to adversely possess land. And I haven't talked about this, but once we got familiarized with why they were there and what the government had done to the Hammonds, for example, we knew these guys weren't domestic terrorists. I mean, that was ridiculous. And the fact that the government was so willingly painting them as domestic terrorists, given everything we had started to see, was offensive.
Across the United States, between 90 to 95% of all criminal cases end in the accused taking the prosecution's plea deal. In the Oregon case, many of the lower-level tiered defendants took plea deals from the prosecution. Were the refuge protesters confessing their guilt, or were they caving to the pressure and threat of a lifetime in prison?
What they did to us and what they do to people in there is they literally throw you in there and threaten you with your life for many, many, many years. They keep you away from your family. They feed you horrible food. They do not let you, and many times even go outside, even see the sun. And you do this day in and day out, and you're literally, it is horrible. It is mental torture in every way.
There are folks who do commit crimes, and when they're going through that system, they may not feel as if they're being treated as innocent, and it doesn't occur to them the same way that it would for someone who is innocent, because they're aware of their guilt and why am I being treated in such and such a way, which is unfortunate, because people who are innocent, who are aware of their innocence, right, then they are being treated in a way that is the opposite of the way that an innocent person should be treated.
And why do they do that? Meanwhile, some prisoners, on the outside, their family doesn't have enough to pay for the phones, and so they're literally isolated. And why do they do this? To break you down so that you will take a plea.
We as a society have agreed that we won't treat you as a guilty person until it has been proven before a jury of your peers, or until you decide that you're gonna plea. Justice Scalia, I believe it was Justice Scalia, was asked if the same question: if there was one thing he could change about the system, what would it be? And he said it would be the system of plea bargaining.
Federal prosecutors have like a 97 or 98% conviction rate, which most of those, it's probably in the 90%, are from pleas.
There's a lot of people who are imprisoned in the United States that they really didn't do what they're imprisoned for, but they were put under such duress, such stress, such fear that they succumbed and took that plea deal.
What happens is people become afraid. They think that this is going to be their life, the rest of their life. And then the prosecutors dangle 7 or 8 years and say, look, rather than the rest of your life, we'll let you out in 7 years. And maybe in 5 years, we'll let you out on a halfway house, and then you get another bunch of probation and all that. And people go, well, that's better than the rest of my life. I don't think I can do this for the rest of my life. And they take a plea, and they lie, literally, do not tell the truth by taking that plea.
There was a feeling of helplessness. I myself, I took a plea out. I plead out. I got a wife and kids that I need to provide for. I was facing a lot of years, and I wasn't willing to risk that. I saw the fastest way to get back to my family, and being there for them was to plea out, unfortunately. But we got to look at the entire thing. This entire endeavor started from our lack of faith in the judicial system.
I believe in what he stood for. I believe him standing for the Hammonds. I believe there was an injustice there, and I believe what he did was right. And, you know, we're taught to love our neighbors, and he went and stood for his neighbor.
My perception and kind of what I was being fed was that I was going to be helping by taking a plea deal. And my peers in the whole thing, I guess you could say, were saying, no, we're here to illuminate. We need to be shining this light.
Even I was like, no plea deal.
Which is what
we're not going to be
she
taking a
had
plea
also
deal
said.
because I believe you guys are going to be getting off.
Just like we have a military industrial complex, we now have a private prison industrial complex. And these private for-profit prisons, they're sending lobbyists in. And by the way, they have shareholders. These shareholders of these for-profit prisons are representatives. That's a scary, sobering thought.
When you take a plea, they're saying, well, you can't plea to something you didn't do because you'll be perjuring yourself. So if I admit to performing an act, then I have to actually admit to performing the act. But I had to make very clear to my attorneys that I couldn't possibly plea to what I was being accused of because it was not my intent to conspire with people to threaten, intimidate, or impede federal officers.
The judges and our representatives, they all have stock and they're shareholders in these private prisons. So they have this money and they send in these lobbyists to wine and dine our politicians, right? And they get our politicians to vote on things like mandatory minimums, which have proven do not deter crime at all.
I still haven't actually ever said that I did what they're accusing me of. And yet I am convicted still, yet I have served a sentence. If they had cared to listen to what I was saying and how I was saying it, the judge would have stopped me and said, Mr. Payne, you are not admitting guilt, right? But she didn't. And I think that goes to the point of the system's intention or sort of, you know, what they were perceiving behind the scenes. Nope, you're guilty, that's great. We know you're guilty, we want you guilty. And so even if you're not going to openly admit guilt, we're still going to continue to accept your plea.
If I could change one thing, hopefully it wouldn't change too much, but only for the better, would be his plea deal. But, you know, it was still short-lived. It wasn't 5 years, 10 years, anything like that. But just for the fact of not having all of his rights, I think that we would take the plea deal back.
Very obvious collusion going on between the prosecution and the judge. You have a federal judge, you have federal prosecutors, you even have federal public defenders, and they're upholding these federal statutes. It's federal. It's not a fair trial.
Prosecution and the judge, you could tell they were in on it together. If you didn't know anyone in there and you came and sat in that room.
The prosecutors, they lied a lot. They would exaggerate things. And they're always there to try to screw, you know, us, the defendants, as much as they can.
These judges are colluding with the prosecution and helping steer a guaranteed guilty verdict.
The FBI agents that were sitting right in front of us, and then everybody else is over here, were coaching the witnesses, and you could tell they were. And I'm sure the jury saw that. I saw that.
That we were not allowed to talk about the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. That was not allowed to be used as a defense.
Coaching, I mean, you could see their heads nodding, and if we nodded our heads, we were out. But the FBI personnel, they nodded their heads. Greg Bretzing was right in front of me. And he was nodding his head to Sheriff Ward and, you know, telling him, don't you dare go there. I mean, you could tell he was like this or his body language. Like a coach. Yes, absolutely. And I know the jury had to have seen that. I know they had to have seen it.
They're like weasels, the prosecutors, I thought. That's my impression about them.
The judge cued the prosecution when they needed to object. And that's illegal.
There were moments in the trial where the judge would sustain objections that hadn't even been made.
For the life of me, I can't figure out why they call them Your Honor, because they have no honor. If they had any honor, they would honor the Constitution. They would honor their oath to uphold it.
There was two things that multiple jury members said that they did not like and that swayed their personal opinion. She wouldn't allow scripture to be read, but Ammon had it memorized, so he said it anyways. And she wouldn't allow the Constitution to be read, and he had it memorized and he said it anyways.
Anna Brown was her name in Oregon.
Ryan Bundy was representing himself, and he did a phenomenal job at it.
I did not have an attorney because of my firsthand experience. I knew that I could recall things, either principles or whatever happened, that I could speak in a way that an attorney could not speak for me.
You know, you have attorneys that they're what am I looking for here? So they have to pass the bar, right? And so they have the bar always looming over their head. Their entire career is in jeopardy if they do anything against the judge or don't go with the judge's game.
I couldn't communicate to an attorney than an attorney communicate to the jury. I needed to have that opportunity. And so, yes, I'm not an attorney. I'm not trained in the law. There's a lot of things that I couldn't do and wouldn't have been able to do. But as a group and as a team, the attorneys were able to do their expert thing. I was able to bring a more personal aspect into it. And so the questions I was able to ask were from a different angle.
They constantly have their career in jeopardy, so they can't sit there and actually try to pinpoint or hit on a subject every time. Once a judge says that's it, we're not talking about the Constitution in here, then that was it.
And that's why I had to go pro se.
And none of those attorneys are going to risk their career going against that judge.
I had to speak for myself, but I was afraid to do that.
And Ammon's attorney said, I have never seen a case like this, to where we have to argue half the day to get a witness on the stand.
Pro se is you become your own attorney. And that's why the judge was upset with me.
And she would not want any of our witnesses. She would eliminate most of them. And if she did let them on, then there was just very little they could say. And yet she would sit there and yell at our defense attorneys for being unorganized and unprepared. And it's like, we were prepared. We actually shipped people up here from Idaho. We were prepared, but you just sent them all home.
And so there was zero expectation that we could win. Zero. Except from the supporters. You know, I think they had some faith and hope.
It was the most horrendous court I've ever seen. The judge was nasty. Judge Brown was really nasty to Ammon and Ryan. She was belittling, especially Ammon. She was belittling them, calling them all kinds of stupid stuff like you're the leader, and chewing them out all the time. Just nasty.
We had all these ideas about what we would do with adverse possession, including the filing of pretrial motions, trying to prep it for introduction at trial, and we got shut down every single way that the court could shut us down on that issue.
I was kind of naive. I didn't know exactly what to expect with this trial. I had a public defender, and he was telling me that, you know, these hearings were going on like almost weekly. They were having hearings, and he was telling me that he had it covered, that I didn't really need to be there, but you know, I should probably attend one just so I could get an understanding of it.
The judge and the prosecutor made it very difficult for us to present our case. In fact, I think when we were trying to present our defense, they were saying that we can't present that defense because it's not related to the charges that we're being charged with.
But what I learned was those hearings are what determine the trial. Trials are won and lost in those pre-trial hearings because that's where you argue what you can bring in for evidence.
The government will put in a motion limiting what can be said. Well, wait a second. I understood that it's supposed to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And now they're saying that testimony has to be limited.
Ken Medenbach, for example, took the stand, and every time he's trying to talk, they're objecting. The prosecution is objecting at every opportunity that he has to try and talk. And the judge is letting it go. She's letting them object and shut down every opportunity that we were trying to have to bring in the truth. And finally, Ken Medenbach, it was prophetic. I mean, he looks over to the judge and he says, "Your Honor, I swore an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You are prohibiting me from telling the whole truth." And it just sent a shockwave through the courtroom.
We went through the process of our American judicial system, which we found to be completely corrupt. We weren't allowed to bring in evidence to defend ourselves.
The only way we were allowed to introduce adverse possession because of the government's motions to the court and because of the court's decisions, the only way we were allowed to introduce the theory of our defense was to do it through Ammon's testimony specifically.
The leader of the armed occupation, Ammon Bundy, took the stand today. Bundy said he had no choice but to testify in his own defense, saying it was the only way to get the truth to the jury.
She would not allow us to talk about the Hammonds, about the Constitution, about what the federal government was doing to the people, the bureaucracies, the BLM, the Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. She wouldn't let us talk about, like, for example, like Harney County's economy, how it was being, decimated by the federal agencies, right? And what she kept saying is that, well, you can't use that as a defense because it's not applicable to the charges.
Now you think about that, and as a criminal defense attorney, that is horribly offensive.
And we kept saying, well, that was the whole reason why we were there. The whole reason why we were there is for the Hammonds. And the jury's not even going to know about the Hammonds or who they are or nothing. But that was the reality.
Because what you're saying to me is that the theory of my defense can only be introduced if I'm willing to put my client, who has constitutional rights against testifying, that in order to get my theory of defense in, I've got to put my client on the stand.
They have literally created a system where they can charge you with whatever they want to charge you with, and then only allow you to argue about the charges that they chose.
They didn't want any discussion about the ownership of the land, which is the crux of the problem again, as where we talked about earlier. So the very purpose for which we were there, she doesn't want discussed.
And a good criminal defense attorney will understand why that predicament is unfair and untenable and shouldn't have been forced upon Ammon.
This is the con that they play. And then they tell the American people that, well, they had their fair day in court. They had their day in trial.
Fortunately for us, Ammon wanted to testify. And Ammon wanted to tell his story. Ammon would often say, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let me get up and tell the truth." I think that the judge conceded that the government's arguments were correct, that this trial wasn't going to be allowed to become a trial that kind of reversed how we looked at the parties. In other words, we weren't going to talk about what the government did wrong. This was about whether or not the defendants had committed a crime and whether or not the government had done something wrong, generally speaking. And there's a lot of eccentricities and technicalities to this in case law and in court, but generally we were not going to be allowed to talk about all the different things the government had done wrong.
You're limited on when you call a witness, but if you're going to take the stand, which most attorneys will say do not take the stand in your own defense, but there's so much more you can say if you're the one that's on the stand.
We had photographs that could be introduced through Ammon that showed Ammon talking about adverse possession.
Basically, the plan here is to take all of these property titles and transfer them back to the people.
Boy, I tell you, when the government saw that, they just went nuts. They didn't want anything like that in front of the jury, even though it was true.
Almost everybody had to take the stand in their own defense. And when they were asked, you're not being forced to do this, I think they all said, yeah, we are.
We live in a day where anybody can go online and find almost anything, where we carry phones and we have ready access to information. It's an age of information, not an age of keeping information from people. So I think the government and the court's efforts, whether justified or not, offended the jury because they felt like, why are you trying to keep information from me? Don't do that. And I think the jury rejected that effort. And I think it drove them to the defendants and to side with the defendants.
I think it was in those moments where all the jurors were like, oh boy. Okay, now what's the real story?
Is these allegations that came out from the government against these defendants that they were trying to build a militia, that they were engaged at the refuge in activities like learning how to forcibly stop cars and remove drivers of cars and put up roadblocks at the refuge to prevent people from coming in, which was the opposite of the truth. They were very welcoming. They welcomed everybody. They accommodated everybody. They cleaned up the refuge, which was a pigsty at the time.
We've come here to work. We've not come here to sit as children and stamp our feet and demand that certain things are met. We're going to go to work.
On a tour, we saw no weapons, just a dozen or so people who took over unoccupied buildings.
The media and FBI weaponized extreme white, anti-government domestic terrorism labels against unconvicted American citizens.
Armed anti-government protesters.
Anti-government militants.
These white guys that came in with their weapons.
Oh, that's kind of racist, white guys.
The labels affected public opinion and how the accused were treated while detained in prison. Although innocence until proven guilty is a long-held legal doctrine, it seems that due process in this case was being set aside to advance an unknown political objective.
We are subpoenaing you as a witness because of the Malheur Refuge case. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, but what did I witness? I didn't witness anything besides I don't know the guy.
But you
I Googled him up,
but you were at the refuge for a bit, weren't you?
Well, I brought twice donuts, that's about it.
So you did go out there, okay. And did you ever use a different name when you were there?
Yeah, I usually go under John.
John? And did you go under John Kilman?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So we're sitting in the courtroom, and I realize that I've been out and I've been able to speak with some of the co-defendants outside. And I'm getting all these pieces put together, and I'm hearing about different people. And I find this guy's name, and his name is John Kilman.
We discovered that there were 15 informants, secret agents, on the refuge with us. 15.
So I got all the information on this person, and I knew that he was undercover. And I said, I went to my attorney, and I even had the guy's phone number. And I went to my attorney, and I said, I want this guy subpoenaed. She said, what for? I said, I don't know.
We only really discovered the identity of 3 or 4 of them. Now, and then in fact, that had a lot of effect on the case, because whatever an agent does to further the crime, so to speak, can't be held against us.
Lisa, who was Wampler's attorney, was standing behind her, and she caught on to what I was trying to tell her, and then they started talking. And I gave them the information. And then they got so excited that I saw that they caught fire, and I went, go out, go get them.
There was this video footage that the government just couldn't wait to play. And it was this footage of a bunch of guys down at what was called the boat ramp. And they were all firing off guns. Tiffany Harris and Lisa Maxfield, who represented Shauna Cox and Neil Wampler, they had discovered this witness who people had talked about as having kind of instigated these events, the shooting down at the refuge, the training to stop cars, putting up roadblocks, manning the towers, you know, kind of creating this sense of a militia running the refuge under Ammon Bundy.
The thing that they kept using over and over and over in the court.
The government took that and kind of said, see, look at these militaristic guys and look at them training on how to stop cars.
To try to convict these guys of how dangerous they were, right? These are farm boys with deer rifles. They aren't militants. They don't know anything. And he gets out there and they videotape them practice target shooting.
Tiffany in particular, I think, really went out and sought to find this guy. And credit to her, because she believed her client. And that's hard to do in these days where so many criminal defense attorneys lose against a government that's just so powerful. And she went out and found this guy who was named Fabio Menaggio.
Fabio Menaggio, he's not even from America, okay? But he works for the government, and he's an undercover. And they bring him in, okay? Fabulous Fabio. He saved our bacon.
He's the one that organized and operated the shooting practice, and they used that shooting practice against us until it was discovered, and the jury could then see the lie that was being put forth by the government. Well, how many more of those took place? We don't even know who the agents are. We know that I can't even figure out how we learned that there were 15, but they wouldn't disclose who they were. So if we don't know who they were, we don't know what they did. And so the jury could see the government lies.
Across the nation, supporters and detractors of the so-called leaders of the Malheur protest waited with great anticipation for the jury's decision. Would the so-called leaders of the Malheur protest be, in effect, found guilty or innocent of the media and government's extreme white, anti-government, domestic terrorism labels?
I think a lot of us were demoralized. More demoralizing is when you look over at the jury stand-in, you'll see the juries. Some of them are sleeping, so that's demoralizing. You know, it's like, oh wow, these people don't even listen. So what's their decision going to be at the end of all this?
I was a basket case. I don't know how else to describe it. And the jury, they selectively picked from Portland, which I had been to Portland a number of times at that point, and I knew that they didn't think anything like me. I knew that they didn't know anything about our rural thinking or rural way of life, and I was so nervous.
We fasted and we prayed, and we had people across this nation, across this world, that was praying for us. And we saw the miracles. And we asked that they would have the ability to see past the lies that were coming and the evidence that we couldn't present, because we had 45 witnesses one day, we got 3.
We were like, pray for the jury, pray us as Americans, dig deep to what you truly believe in, and those are in our prayers. And I know that through that, his testifying, the Spirit, there is This was a moment to decide, who are we as Americans? What do we really believe in? Are you okay with scripture not being read in courtroom? Are you okay with the Constitution of the United States not being read in the courtroom?
The judge, when the verdict came in, the judge, she's kind of pompous. I think she's pretty sure of herself.
When the judge read the verdict,
we all prayed for the jury to see through the lies.
And started to go through the not guilties. You could tell by the look on her face that she was absolutely shocked.
And they did.
Not guilty, everybody!
Not guilty!
Brother! And the Bundys would always pray that the government would trip on their own traps, and they did.
The jury gives her the verdict first. She gets to read it before she announces it to the people. And they hand her the piece of paper. She looks at it and she's like, well, all righty then. Just like, and then she reads that we're not guilty.
Oregon was amazing. You can have these hardcore right-wing people that sit there and bash the liberal left, but there was people from the liberal left that set my friends free and saw through the lies that were being fed to them.
Nobody believed. There were attorneys for other defendants who were not in that case, who I was told sat in the back saying, these guys are idiots. They're all going to jail.
He had an email, because he was in court. And so the kids were getting off the bus, and I remember grabbing them off the bus, and we knelt as a family right there in the dirt, around the cactuses in the dirt. And I said, each one of you pray. Each one of you say a prayer. And so we all said a prayer. And just then he sends me this text, and he's like, it's not guilty. I mean, I was just on cloud 9.
I knew God was with us. I didn't know that he would give us the victory then, but I knew eventually he would, and we saw that today. Eventually God gave the victory. So it's just a matter of faith and doing what was right.
The predetermined narrative of the judge and the prosecution of their guilt was overturned by a jury of the defendant's peers. In this instance, the governing was overruled by the governed. Now that the so-called leaders of the Malheur protest were found innocent, the federal marshals take over Judge Anna Brown's courtroom.
So before they acquitted us, before it was open, I was downstairs with Marcus Mumford, my attorney. And he said, and Rick Kerber, and I don't think Morgan was there, but he said, Ammon, I want you to understand that the marshals do not have a proper hold on you once you're acquitted in Oregon.
Throughout this entire case, the U.S. Marshals maintain vigilance over locking these defendants down because these guys, in their minds, are domestic terrorists.
You see, so he said legally, if you're acquitted, which we believed at that point I was going to be, if you're acquitted, then I'm going to argue for your release. And he said that they're either going to arrest me or tase me.
These marshals did not like our client, and arguably, maybe not even us. So Marcus gets up, and he is not in the well. He's at counsel table. And all attorneys, most, will get up and kind of pace a little bit as they talk or approach the podium. Marcus gets up and starts to make an argument that the marshals, first of all, that the court must release Ammon. And second, that the marshals have to release him.
Chaos inside a federal courtroom as not guilty verdicts are handed down in the case of a wildlife refuge protest.
Now, the judge doesn't like this concept because she knows there's a prosecution in Nevada. But she also knows that if you're going to keep him, you got to have an order to do so, and there isn't one.
Yeah, so after the verdicts were read, the court said, "Hey, you're free to go, but the marshals might have something to say about it." Yeah, they had surrounded me at that point, and so I just turned to them and I said, "Guys, show me what papers you have." And the next thing I know, they just had a hold of me, and then they were twisting my legs and put me to the ground, and then they tased me.
And they attacked Mumford. He said, "Give me the paperwork that says that they have a warrant for these U.S. Marshals to hold him here." And they did not prove up any paper or bring it to him. And he tried to stop them from taking Ammon. And they grabbed all the U.S. Marshals, attacked Mumford, and throws him to the ground. And they took, there was like 8 of them on him, and they tased him.
In front of the United States Attorney, doesn't assault anybody, doesn't touch anybody, doesn't throw a piece of paper on the ground. And when he gets surrounded by at least a dozen federal agents, he puts his arms up in the air and says, "What are you doing?" And they throw him to the ground.
And so they literally tased him. Then they drugged me. It was interesting. They drugged me. They drugged my brother Ryan out, and they drugged David Fry. And David Fry had been acquitted on all charges and had no hold in Nevada, nothing.
If the jury just found me not guilty, how come they're still treating me as a guilty person? Making me wear all these chains and stuff.
They literally beat him to the ground and handcuffed him and drug him down. Here he was, an acquitted man of all charges with no other charges on him.
They attacked me. They tackled me and threw me to the ground and put their knees on my back and all that as an innocent person.
And he still was transported in belly chains, handcuffs, leg irons.
I think what happened at the end is very symbolic of the inappropriate escalation of force by the federal government.
I guess in this new court system, you're not a free person until they finish the paperwork. I was always under the impression that the jury was the final say, not paperwork.
David Fry is free.
I was very excited to finally get out of there. I was a little shocked about the amount of people that were waiting outside for me to come out. I remember one of the girls who bring me pizza. She remembers me saying that I wanted pizza at the refuge or something, so she got me the pizza and said, here's your pizza. so that was nice. I was a little overwhelmed. There was all these people, and of course, you were in nine months in jail. Most of the time, you're by yourself in your cell and stuff, so you're not so used to so many people.
We're gonna come right through here. We'll follow you. Take care, man. Yeah, you too, man.
Hey, 6 days before trial, they charged me with digging the hole.
How big was the hole?
The hole was 4 foot by 7 foot. They went through 4 deadlines about new charges and blew the judge off, and they were still able to add a charge 6 days before trial. The law says 30 days. I'm headed home to go ride my pony for a couple months. The courthouse, and I believe it was Maxine, says, "Well, what will you do now?" I said, "Well, I'll probably ride my horse to prison." And I was thinking, the judge just a minute ago told me I'd be going to Sheridan, 250 miles from my house. I could ride 250 miles. So I said, well, I'll probably ride my horse to prison.
I didn't believe that it was going to be okay. I was thinking negatively, like, oh my God, something's going to happen. I'm going to lose him.
Right before Christmas, they found out I was riding my horse to prison in real life. And they changed prisons and sent me to Lompoc, California, which I ended up riding 1,100, 1,300 miles to prison, all the way down to almost LA. Last ride for freedom.
I was really scared, and almost anything would make me cry.
I'm headed to Lompoc, California to go to federal prison.
And you're riding your horse to prison, sir?
Yes, I'm riding Hellboy to prison.
People didn't know. I was like, yeah, my dad's riding to prison on his horse, and they're like, nuh-uh. And then there's videos, and everybody followed the videos and the podcasts and everything.
I left day after Christmas, and it took like 35 days to get there.
That time, it actually felt like people were with me instead of separating me off. They were supporting me. Like my friend Chloe, her family was really supportive.
Because they changed the distance, it opened up a lot more visibility to what was going on.
Everybody would ask how he is. I'd have to tell them, oh, he's doing good so far, almost there. And then, sorry.
We had complete news crews and cameras and communities coming out to support me, and it was pretty much a parade all the way to Lompoc, California.
Throughout the Govern v. Governing series, we have witnessed the political weaponization of labels and government. The governed were labeled by the media domestic terrorists, right-wing extremists, and white supremacists, while the governing weaponized the government to create a perceived enemy of the state. What sort of justice do you want? Innocent until proven guilty, or guilty until proven innocent? What's your final verdict? Next time on The Final Verdict.
When the trial ended and they were acquitted, the Bundys were acquitted, and the attorney was tased, and that whole scenario happened. And they were immediately grabbed and then taken down to Nevada. I knew something was horribly wrong.
Bunkerville rancher Cliven Bundy put in handcuffs.
We didn't expect this. It was kind of like unreal that it wasn't really happening in our country.
FBI came in. They were ready for a battle in Fallujah.
Jack said that if they do drag him back there, he's going to die in prison.
Why did he take the plea deal?
They said that if he didn't take it, that they were going to go pick up his friend Jack Comerford, who had cancer.
So anyway,
The judge herself calls a sidebar, and Eric Parker is ripped from the stand and no longer allowed to testify.
Throughout the whole ordeal, in the beginning I thought, well, I've got my Sixth Amendment right to a speedy trial. I've got a speedy trial right. And then, boom, I got no speedy trial right. Well, I've got the right to call witnesses. And then, boom, we don't get witnesses to get around that. And then, so, well, okay, but I've got the right to testify on my own behalf. And that's what's going to save me. You know, I kept falling back on the Constitution. I just had my last defense taken away from me.
Our legislator, Dorothy Moon, took it upon herself in writing a letter and gathering support. We helped facilitate gathering signatures for that letter. She turned that into Raul Labrador. Raul Labrador took that letter to Jeff Sessions, had a personal meeting.
The second trial ended. We had an 11-1 to acquit. And then I heard they were going to have a third trial.
The unethical, potentially illegal behavior that was highlighted by Special Agent Wooten as a whistleblower in an email that, or it looks like an email, that we have confirmed the veracity of.
What's the impact of the Larry Wooten memo?
Answered prayer.
When she gets the evidence of the snipers, and it's on the record, they're snipers, she immediately is like, I threw a guy off the stand for mentioning snipers. Yeah, my husband.
Societally speaking, and in our law, we agree that a person who has been convicted can be subjected to punishment. But when you are not convicted, you cannot be. And Ammon was chronically punished.
As a citizen of Idaho, it was our duty to stand up for our fellow constituent, Ammon Bundy.
There's moments where I needed my better half.
Now, I've been a political prisoner for 700 days. I came in here as a free man. I ain't even gonna leave as a free man.
But I never dreamed that they would hold him without bail for 2 years.
But I never imagined it would take 2 years.
With me, convicted of conspiracy to the channel.
It doesn't make sense why, if the first trial they said we're not guilty, why it wasn't the same for the people in the second trial if everybody was a part of the same thing.
I know, it doesn't seem right. Well, I think it kind of falls to the jurors. And in the first trial, they got jurors all over. So they got jurors that lived down in the ranch.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to work on the question and answer session for everybody for sticking around. We're going to keep this pretty quick. So we have with us a number of panelists that I mentioned at the beginning of the live stream. We have with us Morgan Philpott. Let's see, Morgan, are you there?
I'm here. I think
Hey,
you
Morgan,
can hear
welcome.
me. I'm not sure you can see me yet.
Not yet. We'll get you pinned up here. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. There you are. And then we have Ryan Payne. Ryan Payne, are you there?
How you doing, sir?
Hey, Ryan. Welcome. We'll get you pinned here in just a second. We should have Eric Parker from Idaho. Okay, Eric, are you there? And then we should have Tawny Finicum also from Idaho. She's daughter of Lavoy Finicum.
Here.
So, hey, Tawny, welcome. There you are. And there's Ryan. Welcome, Ryan. I see your wife, Ariel. Greetings. And then we have Dwayne Emer. Dwayne, are you there? Hey, Dwayne, welcome.
Yeah, I'm here.
And then just good, awesome. And then we should have Jason Patrick also from, well, I'm not sure where Jason lives now, but there.
I live in your home state, Washington.
Oh, sweet. So I want to welcome all of our panelists here. What I'd like to do is to ask you guys the same question I asked Zoe and Jeremiah, who helped make the film. The question is this. Obviously, there's the story and the events and why you went there. But moving forward, what would you like to see happen in the future by telling these stories? By Americans or citizens becoming aware of your stories. What would you like to see happen moving forward? Can we start with you, Morgan?
Sure. That's a tough question. I have to say that watching that was a little bit nostalgic. It's a little bit depressing at times as well, because it seems that rather than improve, particularly since 2020, things in America have gotten worse. And so I guess what I'd really like to see is a more honest court system, more honest federal government, and a government that doesn't take to persecuting people who stand up for liberty, right? And I unfortunately, I haven't seen that happen in the last couple of years. It seems to have gotten quite a bit worse. And I think that what that would take is a whole lot of people throughout the United States kind of waking up to the condition that we're in, and doing a whole lot of historical research on what America has become, what it used to be, and what people like these defendants and these families have done to try and draw attention to some pretty serious problems.
Thank you, Morgan. I appreciate that feedback. Ryan Payne, how would you and your wife, how would you, going forward into the 21st century, knowing the stories and obviously the reasons you went to now here in Bundy standoff and all those things, but what would you like to see happen with the telling of these stories? If you could change one thing or fix something.
I think that the virus itself, that the government was so intent on shutting down, is really what needs to be opened up to the public. They need to garner it, and that virus was that, as you say, part of self-governance means that we elect a government, but when it doesn't perform the way that we proscribed it to do in the Constitution, that we are not devoid of recourse, that the founders gave us a framework that worked for them, and that was through forming committees of safety, another civil body politic, in order to put that correct public pressure on the government to do the right thing. And so I would say the spread of the virus is what I would like to see go forward.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack with that, and I'd like to ask Jason Patrick, because Jason, you were in one of the tiers that went to when the jury found you guilty. You had to serve time, and so it's different than the plea deals and the not guilties for the leaders of the refuge affair. What's your take on what should happen moving forward with these stories?
I mean, I agree 100% with Ryan. I think, precinct committee chairpersons being leaders of their committee of safety is a really good start. But I really would like to see some court reform. The whole truth, and nothing but the truth was really, I really like the way you captured that here, because, I mean, it's the tale of two trials, right? I get really upset because most people say, oh, everybody got acquitted. Well, I got convicted in a second trial, and it was after, President Trump got elected and everybody in Portland was angry, and the judge did some shenanigans, and there's still an appeal pending, which apparently the Ninth Circuit can ignore till the day is long. So there's something about how the rules of court proceedings don't allow you to tell the truth. There's rules that have changed. That's a bit frustrating for me to watch in real time. I was part of Ammon's trial as a spectator and working in the back and helping, the Fabio Menage thing I helped a bunch on. And they had to work really, really hard to even get the limited amount of truth that they were able to tell that got them acquitted. My attorneys did not work. The attorneys of the four, I don't believe, worked nearly as hard. They just thought that it would be a foregone conclusion that we got acquitted because the other ones did. And, I also can't help but look at what's happening in the House currently, where you have Republicans calling other Republicans terrorists because they don't get their way.
Right. Yeah, those labels have a terrible connotation. They're not just sticks and stones. They have repercussions.
Yeah, Ben Crenshaw, this military hero who went to overseas to fight actual terrorists, according to George Bush, now calls fellow Republicans terrorists because he doesn't get his way. That's ridiculous.
Yes. And I'd like to go back to Ryan Payne to ask Ariel a question. If you could unmute there, Ariel. Moving forward, we already know why Ryan went and the results, the final verdict. But moving forward, if you could fix one thing or change one thing with this story, what would you want to see take place? Yeah, for some there we are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would probably just bring justice for the Finicum family. I wish that things wouldn't have. I wish there wasn't a death involved with it.
Right. Yeah.
That would be the major point there.
That's a great segue. We have Tani Finicum, the daughter of Lavoy Finicum. Tani, your mother couldn't be here tonight because she's very sick. I regret that. We wish her the best. If you could unmute yourself, we'd just like to get your take on moving forward, right? We know what happened. People can go to the website, onecowboystandforfreedom.com, to learn more about Lavoy and his story. As a family, what do you want to see take place moving forward in the 21st century with this story?
Well, I think one thing that's kind of stuck out to me is how, we're supposed to get our fair day in trial. And I mean, this video just, clearly shows how it wasn't fair at all. And so that's kind of one thing that I've been so grateful with these films that, we may never get our fair day in trial, but at least we have these videos to, voice our truth and to share our side where the media and all of the misinformation which was out there. And it's like, I mean, it's just so like, you know, you see people in chains and in jail, and it's just this automatic assumption, you're bad, you're guilty. And so, you know, people hear, you know, oh, Lavoy Finicum was, you know, was shot. Oh, well, there's probably a reason. They probably were justified in that. And, you know, unless they take the time to actually hear the truth from, you know, not just the media or, you know, government entities that have a specified agenda. It's nice, like kind of like how Zoe was saying, there is a huge bag of snakes. And it's just so nice to be able to have the ability to untangle those for those who are willing to listen and learn, because that's really what it's going to take to make a difference. Just like they were saying, since all these trials, our country has kind of gotten a lot worse. And, you know, the only thing that's going to change it is people like you and me who are willing to take the time to learn the truth and to make the difference and have the change. So that's kind of my thought on it.
No, I appreciate that. I know that for you and your family, the court case was dismissed by the judge, and that it's going to go to the Supreme Court now, not because of your case, but because of the allegations of the judge's behavior. So we'll know something by the end of this year, whether the Supreme Court will take up the case. But I appreciate what you said about if the evidence, Morgan, real quick, I want to come back to you, is if the evidence from Lavoy's death never makes it to the courtroom, obviously they'll never get a day in court there. But does telling this story like this help in any way to get those facts out there so that the people know or have the ability to make a change? I mean, isn't the court the last place, or you know what I mean? Or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how forthright do you want me to be? How elaborate do you want me to be on my response to that question? I'm
elaborate. Everyone wants elaborate.
We're living under a court.
Wait, the whole truth. Yeah, someone just said the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then since 2020, you know, again, just to add on to this, since 2020, we've been living under a court system that issued orders masking every child in the United States of America and closing off people's access to fair trials, open courtrooms, right? Everything's virtual now. And that was done by court fiat since 2020.
That happened to Sarah Brady in Idaho. She was the mom who took her kid to the playground, and they arrested her and drug it out, and it was courtrooms. And just yesterday, the Attorney General of Idaho dropped the case after $27,000 and 2 years of what you were just describing. So there's a practical case.
So you think about that, right? And now, you know, thinking, one, do I want this to get better? Of course I do, right? Of course.
Yeah.
But think about the wrongful death lawsuit in particular, right? After watching that video, which was wonderful, I'm so glad you guys put that together, because nobody's told the story in this way, right? But think about the dismissal that was issued against Jeanette's wrongful death suit. It was based upon a late filing. Now, the whole principle underlying courts and access to justice is that we don't make decisions on cases unless we get to the merits of the case. That's one of the underlying principles of the law. And here you have a court that basically says, you were late, dismissal with prejudice, and your day in court is over without any merits whatsoever. I don't care how many mistakes an attorney makes. If they're non-substantive mistakes and innocent mistakes, there's an entire doctrine in the law for that. It's called excusable neglect or good cause. And if you can cite those things, the court's supposed to say, yeah, let's get to the merits of this thing. But instead, what you've seen from day one in the Bundy cases and in the Finicum wrongful death case, you didn't see this in the trial of Astorita, the FBI hostage rescue team member, of course, right? Because the whole thing, right? I mean, what we have had happen in America is now being run by how else do you put it except for, you know, it's organized crime. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. When you have the Justice Department producing almost all judges, and then those judges who come out of the Justice Department working directly with their former colleagues, right? At the end of the day, I mean, who do you think's going to win? It's not going to be the people. It's not going to be Jeanette Finicum in a wrongful death suit. But I never thought it would become so egregious so quickly, right? So arbitrary as it has become, where courts can just simply make Jeanette's case disappear, or make defendants disappear for 2 years into a prison system,
Right.
and literally torture them for 2 years, and then come out of it and say, well, you know, let's just bury it. And that's what they've done. So
Yes.
I'm grateful for this, because if people can watch this and pass this around, you know, maybe some of the what's the word I'm looking for? The outrage that should be felt by Americans will start to be felt, because they'll start to see the truth of what is being done by I don't know what else to call them except for criminals and robbers who run our government.
You know, thank you for that feedback, Morgan. We have Eric Parker joining us, and Eric was at the Nevada event in 2014, and ultimately, after everyone was arrested, LaVoy was killed, and everyone was arrested for Oregon. Then they started rounding up people from Idaho. And Dwayne, I'm going to get you just in a second, but Eric, after this film and going through all the experiences you've gone through in the last 7+ years, 2 years in prison, multiple trials, hung juries, being thrown off the stand, what is your anticipated hope? We release Nevada trials, we tell the story. What would you like to see accomplished as a result of those stories being told?
Well, first, I want to thank you guys for making these videos. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I just got to turn our volume up on our end.
I'm at the Republican state meeting. I had to go out to my car, so forgive me.
What? Hey, wait, I thought you were anti-government.
Right. That's what they say. But to your question, I hope that we can start to address the bigger issue as I see it, and that's the weaponization of the executive branch. The executive branch was supposed to be so small that it couldn't affect anybody. It didn't matter who was in the seat. But we've gotten to a point where these agencies have gotten so out of control that we have to address the root problem. And I think more and more every day, Americans are seeing that. You know, in 2014, when I walked off that bridge, Harry Reid got on TV and he said, these aren't patriots, these are domestic terrorists. And that's where it started for me. And at that point, I told people, I said, soon it won't just be us. Anybody who dissents from the opinion and narrative of the federal government, the executive branch, is going to be branded and designated a domestic terrorist. And I didn't understand what that meant yet, but sooner or later, I ended up getting a pretty good education on it. What we need, what I hope is that the people who have control, our elected officials, start to open their eyes. And I think they're starting to, you know, I mean, when you have members of Congress who are receiving these same threat assessments that we received and sitting presidents and everything else, they're starting to see that, but I'm hoping that they can see the bigger picture and really start to look at what these tools are that are being used by the executive branch, by the weaponized executive branch, to victimize the people. And you know, we can try to stick band-aids on gunshots by looking at mandatory minimums and these things of these sorts. But until we address these root problems, until we're willing to look at the criminalization that's occurring in the FBI, and start to defund them and start to look at the tools they're using to victimize. You know, that is the threat assessment. That is the branding of the domestic terrorist designation. You know, these things, once they do that, they initiate a process, and the Patriot Act kicks in, and then the surveillance starts, and it's this whole process where the people lose their rights and they don't even know it's happened to them. But these elected officials, the people with control, they have the ability to take away these tools and to get involved legislatively and protect us. And, you know, I just hope that now that maybe their necks are on the line a little bit, that they're starting to see that it can be anybody. It's not just an electrician from Idaho who believes in constitutionally protected conduct. It's all of us. It's now parents at school board meetings. It's now, and I've said this since 2014, it's going to be all of us. We're all going to be on the same boat. We're going to be designated terrorists if we disagree. And that's where we're at now. And I just really hope that the people with the ability to do something, the elected officials, hear it and really come and start talking to us about the tools, because we saw them used. You know, the motion of limine in a process, in a court trial, you know, nobody understands what that term even means. That's the process they go through to limit your speech in the trial. You know, you just saw them all talk about being unable to say Constitution, First Amendment, Second Amendment, weaponization, militarization, these things. That's all done through the motion of limine. And that is the government asserting its right in the trial. Well, the government doesn't have rights, they have responsibilities. And not only that, if they do have rights, they certainly don't trump the accused. And so, judicially speaking, we have to start figuring out how to limit that, how to put it back in its rightful place, where government doesn't have rights, they have responsibilities, the responsibility to prove guilt. We're just going to be in the same boat. And we're here with the J6 people. You know, I didn't go to that protest, and I wasn't at the White House that day, but it's the same thing. They were exercising constitutionally protected conduct, and now they're being victimized, and it's the same. They used the same tools to keep me in for 2 years, claiming I was violent, that they're using now to keep these people detained. It's all the same playbook. And if we could look at that playbook and look at the tools they're using and limit them legislatively and put them back in their box, that's what we need to do. And frankly, we need to defund the FBI, but that's a whole nother conversation. Sorry, I went on a little bit of a rant.
It's as Zoe said, it's a big spider web or a spaghetti noodle, or it's an octopus. And it does seem hard to untangle it, and maybe it causes some hopelessness for somebody. But for everyone who's streaming still online, and those of you here live, like to ask you to think of some questions you have for the panelists. I'm going to go to Dwayne Emer. Make sure we'll start with the live group first. If you have a question, who it's to, and then we'll ask the question. And then we'll go to the online folks and ask your questions. And then at that point, we're going to let the live stream folks go. And then for those of you who want to stick around, both on Zoom and at the live show, you can stick around and ask questions, to continue to ask the panelists questions until your heart's content. So, Dwayne, I want to save you for last, because Rebecca was the last person in the film. And she always breaks my heart when I watch her interview, because it's like the Finnegans and Ariel and Angie Bundy, etc. The family is always the one left to pick up the pieces, it seems. And I kind of wanted to ask you a two-part question, and the rest of the panelists, you can jump in too on this answer. And that is, one is, what do you hope to accomplish moving forward with telling the story? Like, what do you like to see America accomplish? And second is, I would like to know how Rebecca's doing. How is she picking up the pieces? Is that okay? You have to unmute yourself on your end.
I could answer the first part pretty easy. Rebecca's, she's difficult. She's I don't know if she'll ever get over what happened, because after our interviews, she sang a song on TikTok, and they kicked her out of the high school in the middle of cheerleading practice. And she was labeled a domestic terrorist. So she had to go to a different high school, get her high school diploma, which she did. I'm very proud of her. And she is doing good in life, but it hurt my family. It really hurt my family in 100 different ways. So what I would like to see, by telling the story and moving forward, is I would like to reach out to the January 6th people and know that they're about to walk through everything we walk through, and that they're not alone, and try to give them some strength and guidance. I worked with the January 6th defendant, two of them, most of the summer, and they are really good kids. And I offered my experience, strength, and hope to them. And that's all I can do.
Yeah, it's interesting because you 27 in the Oregon, dozens in the Nevada, and now at January 6th is I think the last count 964. So it does seem to be ramping up. Thank you for the feedback about Rebecca. Do we have any questions from the live crew for the panelists? Yep, here you go. You got it? Okay. All right. Say who you are and.
Hi, I'm Lonnie Williams. First off, thank you so much for your struggle and being brave. And I know that each time you go through this, it's an open wound. I don't know exactly what you feel, but I do know what it's like to be called a constitutional terrorist for standing up for the values, and it's hard. One of the things I wanted to first say is a public apology to everybody. In 1992, when I was an infantry soldier in the Presidential Honor Guard, I trained FBI in mount training in how to storm buildings. And that was the genesis of the program that was used against the people. And I feel absolutely terrible. And I was moved by this once again and reminded that me as a soldier, just as a 19-year-old kid teaching these FBI agents, and they turned around and used it against our own people. And I'm mortified, and I am deeply sorry that my service and compassion and my service to my country was turned against our own people, and I am dreadfully sorry against that. But I wanted to say thank you most of all, but what can we do for you? What can we do to help you so that you are not marginalized, so that your story is not forgotten, so that you have the support that you need to carry this on and carry this torch for all Americans? How can we surround our arms around you and love you and give you the support that you need? That's what I'd like to know most.
How about we start with Ryan and Ariel?
First off, I feel exactly the same as far as my service goes. My military service, had some part in helping with the Joint Terrorist Task Force tactics that were used at the Bundy Ranch in 2014, and on what played out at the refuge. So I certainly am empathetic with that perspective. I would say, just, I'm speaking personally here, that it's not necessarily something that I feel, is to help us per se, but I would reiterate what I said before. Look into how was this union founded? What was it that, not just the spirit of what took place in the 1760s, 70s, and 80s, but the actual mechanisms that they used. what it is that this virus was that they had to shut down, which is that we, the people, are the government, and therefore we can do what we need to do in order to correct the government that we institute when it goes out of control the way it certainly is. And so I think that continuing that to spread that word of committees of safety. What is a committee of safety? Most people don't know, and yet the Declaration of Independence that they celebrate every 4th of July was written by the Continental Committee of Safety, and so education is key, and education will build fortitude. And when fortitude and courage are coupled with faith, this is how we can right the wrongs and pursue world peace, working together.
I would think maybe, paying more attention to what's going on in local communities, your local, courthouse elections, whenever they are having their meetings, and what's going to happen to be passed. Be more active in what they have going on, where you actually know what's happening in your surroundings. And, if you need to write up something, I think that'd be a contributing factor to moving in the right direction. And having faith.
No, thank you. And by the way, just so you know, your computer is unidirectional, so you have to turn the microphone your way just so the audience can hear you next time, Ariel. Tawny, how would you respond to the question, how can they support the story, et cetera?
I kind of, what's been said before is that education, that's been kind of where we started, is first figuring out what system are we protecting, and we learned that for Center for Self-Governance, and that's really helped us to learn how to be involved in our communities, how to protect our rights, what are our rights, and if each one of us did that in our own communities, you just need a few people in your community, and it makes a big difference. So you kind of can help the people who still have their head in the sand just by you becoming educated and you doing, the work that it takes.
Right. Thank you, Tawny. Eric Parker, what about you? How would you respond?
That's all.
Well, I'm still reflecting on what he had said, the training and stuff, and intentions. Don't hold it against yourself too much. The intentions of the FBI were a good thing, and there's good agents that you probably taught how to stay safe, and that's good. What would I ask that you do is keep praying, and share the story. A lot of effort goes into making these documentaries, and it covers the whole gambit. Starts at the ranch in 2014. Buy those movies, grab them up, and invite your friends to your house and watch them. And maybe one a week or something, and just share the story. On the broader picture, don't let our story scare you. Don't let the fear of what happened change your perspective on right and wrong and what needs to be done. And don't live in fear, and defend your neighbors, defend your family and your loved ones, and Don't fire unless fired upon, but shoot back.
Dwayne Emers, how would you respond?
I don't really know where to begin because there's so much bad happening nowadays. You know, where do we start? We're still getting harassed from the FBI. I had a sheriff told by the FBI a couple weeks ago to come in my yard and to talk to me. You know, they monitor everything we do still. You know, I don't know what do we change first. You know, that's all I got to say, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's good. Jason.
Well, I maybe disagree completely with a lot of people. I see us winning the day. I told Eric Parker while he was in prison, he was sort of downhearted. He says, you know, did we change anything? I says, we changed a million things and they're not done changing. And they're not done changing now. One of the reasons that 20 congressmen are fighting the establishment Republican is because of what we did. The reason that they're still calling us terrorists and calling Republicans terrorists is because we are the virus. Just like Ryan Payne just said, we are the virus. Spread the virus all day, every day. Whatever you do, here, you want to know what I want you to do? Whatever you do, don't vote. Voting is stupid. Be part of the republic. Join and become a delegate, right? Delegates vote in delegations, and that's what a republic is. Voting is a straw poll of who the population sort of kind of likes, right? Be in the delegation, change the delegation. There's a Republican floor fight coming up in the next presidential election. It's going to be amazing. The most amazing thing I've ever witnessed in my lifetime. It's not Ronald Reagan's Republican Party. We're fighting for real things and real stuff currently. Get involved. So here's the beautiful, beautiful picture that I see. So Ryan Payne paints it beautifully with the committees of safety, right? So committees of safety. Well, I'm going to tell you, you have a committee of safety right now in your AO, and it's called your precinct, right? You have a precinct committee person, right? Go get involved. That's where you get involved. Get involved in the political process. Voting is stupid, in my opinion. I hate voting. I think it's dumb. I liked being part of the Ron Paul party where we got involved politically. And I went to political activism because I got very, very frustrated when they cheated Ron Paul in 2012. But I can tell you who witnessed that firsthand sort of was Donald Trump. So he knew what was going to happen and he made something happen. So go change the room. Derek Grayson, right? So I have a friend who ran for Senate in Georgia, Derek Grayson, and he said, go change the room. Be part of the republic. Go change the room. Get involved. Voting is just where you go punch a card. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're American, you can vote, and that's good. But that's not a republic. A republic is active, boots on the ground, getting in the room and changing things. And you don't have to be elected to Congress to do it. You can do it through your precinct, going to meetings. It takes a lot of time. It's like banging your head against the wall. But it's better than being in prison sometimes. Not that I regret. I wouldn't change a thing.
Jason, I think Jason, you're going to be a guy on the back of the caboose of a train going from city to city and making stump speeches, right?
No. Stump speeches are for politicians, and I never want to be one. I'll leave that to Eric and Ammon. That's the dumbest thing I can imagine. I'm going to be the guy that when Eric isn't doing it, I'm holding his feet to the fire and be like, bro, I'm going to be a thorn in your side until you die unless you're doing the right thing, because that's a republic if you can keep it. But it's the same. It's twofold, right? So it's a precinct. The beauty part of it is the systematic politics, right? Your Center for Self-Government is systematic politics. Go find out where your precinct is, because it's your neighbors. So here, what I want to see change, or what I want to have happen, here's what I want. I want two things, or three things. The first is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And after that, get involved in the republic. It looks like your precinct, the precinct, or your, whatever your precinct is, and then make that precinct become Ryan Payne's Committee of Safety that he talked about. And it's not even Ryan Payne's, it's from the Declaration of Independence. It's systematic politics. It's how we were founded. And get involved. And then get your sheriff involved. And say, hey, sheriff, here's what I said. Like, you can look at me. I have a YouTube video from as soon as I got out from my trial. They were asking me, they put a camera and a microphone on my face. I'm like, listen, I didn't get convicted, which means I have an appeal. I says, but here's what I've asked every law enforcement officer. Is the Constitution the law? Well, yeah, the Constitution is the law. Okay, then who do I call when they break it? Well, you call your congressman. I'm like, I don't call my congressman when my bike gets stolen. I call, right? So who's going to enforce the Constitution? We the people. It's our Constitution, and we have to enforce it. Get involved, be in the republic. I certainly don't want to make stump speeches, but I don't mind coming on your show and saying, hey, you can do it, change the room. If you have to, use your First Amendment, and if you must, use your second. But you don't need to use it, you just stand there with it. They'll pay attention, I promise. And then they'll throw you in jail.
Thanks, Jason. Morgan, are you there? Morgan's still there?
I am here. Yeah.
After hearing the responses from these panelists on the question, what can be done? What's your response?
Well, if I never met Lavoy personally. I did get to know Ammon and Ryan quite well, and Jason and Ryan. And if I can say one thing about all of them, particularly the one who gave his life, they're all men of God. They love the Lord. And I can't help but think of the Lord's statement in Isaiah 28, where, it talks about this point in time in the prophetic future where the world would seem to enter into a covenant with death and an agreement with hell, which kind of seems like the time in which we live. And the Lord jumps in and he says, look, I will rise up as in Mount Perazim. I will be wroth as in the valley of Gibeon, and I will do my strange work and bring to pass my strange act. And, you tie that together with the prophetic future, and it's this reference to a strange act is this covenant that God makes with those who John the Revelator talks about give their blood for what they believe in. And Lavoy did that, right? He laid down the blood of a martyr. And John sees this time also, John the Revelator. He sees this work that God does, this strange act. And it's because of the blood of the saints and because of the faith of the men and women of God that the Lord does this. And so think about that for a second, right? And ask yourself a practical question. I absolutely agree with the committees of safety. In fact, that is the order the Lord laid down to Israel in the book of Deuteronomy. And it's how he commanded his people to organize themselves. So I absolutely think we should do that. And also take this video and distribute it, because I hope that when people see what actually happened, that they might be inspired by the Holy Spirit to see that the blood of saints has been laid down, to exercise faith in the only thing that's going to save us now, which is the God of Israel. And Lavoy believed in that. Lavoy believed in God. And I know Lavoy lives today with God. And if there's one thing Lavoy is doing right now, it is just pleading through any heavenly mechanism he can that the people on this earth will wake up and love liberty as much as he did.
Thank you. Thank you guys for your answers to the question. We have any other questions from the live audience? Okay, so do we have any questions from online? Okay, if you have any questions from the online, go ahead and send it through the chat and we'll get it to the panelists. I would like to ask a question, and that is, these next 2 years, we're going to see Jim Jordan from Ohio, I believe, is going to become the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and he has promised to do investigations and oversight of some of these weaponization of labels in government. He's even said this many times. What are the prospects of success in bringing those things to light, as Morgan was talking about these next 2 years? Is there any hope there? Go ahead and take it away. Is there any hope at all in reversing the political weaponization of labels in government through that kind of process, oversight committees like they did with Donald? Yeah, go ahead.
You
Morgan.
want me to answer that one?
Sure. Any one of the panelists.
So interestingly, so long as there is a notion that, well, how do I say this right? I don't think it will be partisan in nature, right? Because both parties are guilty of political weaponization. There's a principle that I think that can be learned from the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, bear with me on this. What happened in the Black Lives Matter movement, whether you agree with their politics or not, is that they stood up and they said, look, you, the government, have become so morally bankrupt that you are not allowed to enforce the law anymore against us. And in a way, they're correct, right? Again, you may not agree with their politics, but what happens when political weaponization becomes such the government lacks the moral authority to enforce the law? What you have to have happen at that point in time is, individually speaking, a Jim Jordan must, of his own courage and accord, stand up and start to do things to try and bring accountable in Washington, D.C. And I think the only thing he can do is knock out some of the blocks in the Tetris tower, right? Or the Jenga tower, in hopes that by doing so, the overwhelming power that they have, right, that they brought to bear against the Malheur and Bunkerville defendants is diminished. Because right now, you come to Utah, for example, and we've got a conservative congressman in Provo who is passing FTEs, those are full-time employees, in budgets to further arm people within not just the BLM now. And Eric and Ryan and Jason and everybody who have participated knows exactly how many guns and Bearcats and helicopters these guys had. This guy in Utah, one of the reddest congressional districts in the nation, is authorizing more money under the Antiquities Act to now not just have snipers, in the BLM and Forest Service and Park Service, but he wants to put more money in the Antiquities Act for the national monuments. So do I think, efforts like Jim Jordan will help? Yes, but they must be focused on removing the power structures that exist for the federal government to act unilaterally through places like BLM and the Forest Service and the National Park Service, and to do so again by federal enticements to local sheriffs in order to get them to do things they would never do before. Right. So trying to sum this up, does it help to fight political weaponization? Yes. There must be some consequence on the national level for those who engage in the weaponization of government against individuals, but there also has to be some accountability at a local level for people who start to take the money, like they did in Nevada, which is why they were able to do what they did in Nevada when they could never do it before. And there has to be some accountability within places like the FBI's HRT team when they go in and do some of the things they did. So we need a powerful movement in Washington, D.C., but we also need a local effort to create accountability for sheriffs who give in and take that money and join those efforts and risk local autonomy in doing so.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Morgan. Tawny.
I think I'm answering your question. I'm not quite sure, but like right now, my husband is up in Boise trying to help pass a resolution to change the language for, domestic terrorism, and that's making a difference. Just, us, accountant and stay-at-home mom, we're making a difference in our area. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it
Is that
does.
what you're asking?
No, she's talking about a domestic terrorism state law that's being introduced in Idaho, North Dakota, and South Carolina that add checks and balances to prevent what happened to Lavoie and to the folks that were showing up to protest from happening again, using labels and then adding extensions. Eric Parker, if you're there, the extension on your what they were adding to your charges was not a domestic terrorism charge, but an actual extension in your threat assessment, labeling you an extremist, labeling you a domestic terrorist, but in fact, you technically had not committed domestic terrorism crimes, right? Is it going to be helpful to your state? And can you get the phone just a little closer, just so we can hear your audio?
Yeah. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
So the designation was actually domestic terrorism, domestic terrorist. And the problem is there's no charge that could be implemented there, because the charge of domestic terrorism, they have to prove that you're connected to an internationally designated terrorist organization like Hezbollah or Al Qaeda or something like that. So they actually, when they designated me that in 2014, they knew that they couldn't charge me with that charge because I didn't have any affiliation with an internationally designated terrorist organization. But what it did do was open the door for them to utilize these tools within, for instance, the Patriot Act, to start to basically supervent my constitutional rights, right? Everybody's constitutional rights. So the actual designation was the point. It's not to get the charge. It's to open up the door to give them the tools to start to follow, listen. I mean, your Fourth Amendment goes out the window. Your Fifth Amendment. But anyway,
honeypot, gaslight.
Yeah. Yes. And even set you up and get involved and like we see with Michigan and the plot to kidnap the governor, allegedly, right? But I guess what I'd like to say too is with Jim Jordan and any oversight committee hearings, right, that may take place, that hopefully take place. It's great that they're going to have these hearings and that they're going to bring some whistleblowers forward and stuff. But what I hope he doesn't do is allow it to focus specifically on one aspect, mainly even being the president or whatever. They need to ask the right questions. They have to get at the root of it. Like, what are the tools being used to victimize people without due process? And after the hearing, they have to follow up with legislation that takes those tools away. It's one thing to get it all on the record, like we've seen over and over again. You know, Benghazi's all on the record, but what they have to do, and they've had BLM oversight committee hearings, right, where they asked about snipers and they asked about the militarization and they asked about all these things, right? Mike Lee asked. But what happens afterwards? Is it nothing? Was it all just for donations for their next campaign? Or are they going to go and use their jurisdiction and authority to legislatively take these tools away, right? I pinpoint the tool, find the tool, take it away. There has to be a plan with these oversight committee hearings. You know, grandstanding on C-SPAN isn't going to change anything. And I hope that he and they understand that. And hopefully they start to look for the right questions to ask.
That's great feedback. By the way, for the panelists, as people are chatting with you in the chat, you can also communicate with folks and answer some questions there. Jeremiah, do we have some questions? You want to say who they are? And
yeah, we do. Number one, and I think I might actually combine two questions together from two people, because one wasn't addressed to anyone in particular. But this one is to Mr. Philpott. And the question is, putting it together, number one, are lawyers, I'm assuming sort of as a whole in America, waking up to these issues now? And then as sort of a follow-up, it says, how do we get the judges from Michael, how do we get the judge in this case removed from the bench? There was nothing there that demonstrated good behavior.
Okay, I missed one of the words. Could you repeat the first part about the lawyers?
Yeah, are lawyers waking up to these issues now?
No. In fact, it's getting worse. One of the things that you'll notice with attorneys today is that the court system is a club, and it's a club run primarily by the bar. And one of the exceptions to the club is the Justice Department, who is outside the control of the bar. And so what you begin to realize as an attorney is that if you want to pad your pockets and make good money, as attorneys can, you don't risk your political capital. You don't fight the system. And when you fight the system, you know, I'll give you an example. We used to have a system of public defenders, and now we have CJA attorneys. And it's the judges, federal judges, who cut the checks to the CJA attorneys, and it's the federal defender's office that's run by the federal government. The whole thing is federal. It's a little club, and if you mess with you muddy the pool, you're in trouble. I had a case in Utah, a federal case in Utah, a gun case, and after the judge found out who I was, we were about to get a dismissal. He 180-degree turn the next day, and the federal government had a cake for beating me, right? I mean, who does that, right? When you mess with this club, you get blackballed. And so the future of law and justice is not in lawyers. Most of them are too afraid to risk the political capital necessary to buck the system. And then, even then, if you could, you know, you're going up against a bar system that went after me and Marcus and almost everybody who got involved in the Bundy case. So it's getting worse.
We have Ryan.
Okay,
Payne.
second part of that question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Can you give me the second part of that question again?
Yeah, the second question is basically what can be done to remove the judge of this case, as nothing they did would qualify as quote unquote good behavior.
You can't. In fact, what's crazy about the judicial system is we cannot even look at the communication of the judges between each other. We just have to assume that they are beyond reproach. So, for example, if you suspect that a judge is perhaps communicating with another judge to remove Marcus Mumford from ever practicing law again in Oregon, which is exactly what happened, you can't get access to prove that. These judges are beyond reproach. And so all you can really do is pray that these judges maintain some core of belief in eternal, immutable consequence for their action and follow principles. And you know, this is on a lower level. If you've ever been involved in a divorce or an adoption or anything like that, these judges literally have binders about this thick back in their offices that they use to tell them what to do now, because so many of these judges today are not schooled in constitutional law and principle. They're brought up in a system of arbitrary governance that is a club and a game.
Thank you, Morgan. Ryan?
2 points on it, but one of them is a sort of, I guess, maybe a reply to a point that Morgan just made, and the other goes to the notion of crime prevention. The first one, under the idea that there's really nothing that we can do. I just, you know, I don't want to say what we can do now, but if you are inclined, you may research what is known by historians as the first American Revolution. And it took place in, I believe, April of 1774. And it was in Massachusetts. And they're called mandamus judges. They were put in place by the British government of the colonies. And the judges that the colonists had elected were replaced by them. So now we have a forced judicial system, unelected judicial system there. And what the colonists did was they all got together and they occupied the courthouse. They didn't allow the hearings to take place. When the judges all met at one of the judges' houses, instead, they went and occupied the judge's house. I'm not saying this is the right way or the wrong way. I'm just saying that, Morgan, as often as I agree with you, I would have to disagree. I think history bears out that there were ways to do this previously. Whether they're the right ways to do it now, I don't know. On the notion of crime prevention, I think is something that really needs to change in our minds. Crime prevention means thought control. It means that we're, and oftentimes crime prevention now has manifested itself as creating crimes and then solving them. So there seems to be a lot of trust in the shift in the Republican Party, a little closer to the ideas of the Constitution.
We lost your audio, Ryan.
Did we?
Who did?
Can you hear me?
Oh, apparently I muted the TV. I apologize. Keep going.
So the this shift in the Republican Party seems to be garnering some support, but I think a strong reminder that the corrupt judicial system that we have right now, the corrupt federal policing agencies, and a lot of the federal dollars that have flowed all the way down into the local level, they have manifested the police state largely on the Republican Party, not the Democrat Party. And if you want to garner a good decision from a court that is in that respects civil rights, you're much more likely to garner that decision from a Democrat appointed judge than you are from a Republican one. And so I would be leery to place too much faith in either of the parties, frankly.
Jeremiah, do we have any other questions?
We have a very interesting one that is not addressed to anyone, but
we'll see what
this could be
see what
fun.
they say.
Yeah, Lynn has a great question. She
Mark,
says,
Mark,
yes,
can
Eric.
I take a shot at that question, the last one, real quick?
Of course.
The part about the judges, right? How do you remove the judge? I think that the questioner mentioned good behavior of the judge, and that's a constitutional term, right? Serve under good behavior, times of good behavior. So what I'd like to remind everybody, and what I think the point should be, is that, there's this myth of three separate co-equal branches of government. That's a myth. The three branches of government were created to check each other and to balance the system. And if that is the case, which it is, then it's up to the legislative branch to do something, to check the judicial branch. And the legislative branch can do that legislatively, right? They can create a process where we maintain, a database of the behavior of judges, right? Maybe judges are supposed to get 3 strikes and you're out. Who's to say what the legislature can say and not say about what needs to happen about keeping an eye on these judges and their behavior? The legislative branch has the ability to check the executive branch and the judicial branch. They don't even have the ability, they have the responsibility to check the other 2 branches. And I think that it's important that we don't just say, well, there's no answer, or the only answer is defense, or anything like that. The answer is to encourage the people with the control and ability to change these things to do so, to use their authority.
We proved that in your we proved that in your
go ahead.
case. In your case, that was proven, right? With just, we can't go into too much detail, but the judge's behavior in your case changed dramatically within 24 hours after Attorney General Sessions intervened. But that intervention is related to people proactively engaging in what I call the art of political chess. But they successfully moved the state legislature, Raul Labrador, Attorney General Sessions, and that judge's behavior changed within 24 hours. It's possible to make that.
It is possible, and it continued to change too. It wasn't even just a change in the end of my trial there, or whatnot. When the third tier came in, during my trial, I couldn't say First Amendment, I couldn't say Constitution. They took the Constitution away from me. I couldn't even have it in my hand, right? They all of a sudden, after that situation occurred and the letter went out and Sessions and Raul and all this, all of a sudden you have Ryan Bundy giving a 2-hour opening statement, basically an education class on the Constitution. He's reading from it. He's got it in his hand. He's talking to the jury, right? The whole thing changed. She knew that she was in the crosshairs and that her behavior was being observed and documented. And so it can be, but it should be easier. There should be a process, a check and balance put in place that can be checked and looked at by these lawyers and used to get into a different venue. When a judge has bias or has been known to be a political activist on the stand, that's 3 strikes and you're out. Let's see the law. Let's see 3 strikes and you're out. Proven intentionally biased or criminal. There should be a law and process that dictates what time it is and when it's time for them to take the robe off.
It's interesting perspectives on the judicial branch and the attorneys and the courts rooms and how to change their behavior. It's chess, but it's possible. It's possible to make change. It just takes, as somebody said at the beginning of the presentation, it does take a lot of work. So we had a question from Lynn Laird.
Yes, and it is. I find it interesting that the charges / prosecution related to the events in Nevada came after the prosecution of those involved at the refuge. I'm curious if anyone could explain why there was such a delay.
Well, it went, I guess I'm going to take this one, Mark, it went from 2014 to 2016-ish, with nothing, no charges, right? At the point where they had arrested the Bundys and everybody else for Malheur, Cliven was going to Oregon. He was flying to Oregon, and he was going to go there to protest and talk to the people and whatnot. And for whatever reason, my opinion is that they couldn't have that, and they couldn't arrest Cliven for, literal pre-crime and just arrest him for traveling freely to Oregon. So they broke out that Nevada indictment and they arrested him first. And when that happened, the rest of us kind of knew. I mean, I think there was probably 2 or 3 days in between there that once they dropped the indictment on him, the rest of us assumed that it was coming for us. I really do think after reading the indictment that day they handed it to me, it looked like something that was written overnight. And, I really do think that they just used it to try to stop, like Ryan said, and like it said on TV, to stop the virus, right? They could take the rest of the players off the board with the second indictment.
Any other feedback on Lynn's question?
Yeah, and maybe Morgan probably has I would say a very good ability to speak to this, just with his knowledge of how this system works, and then being able to view it from an attorney's perspective as to the what are sort of the strategic things. Was it a systemic deal? Not maybe systematic deal where they had to build the case and this and that. We could say that or whatever. There's another perspective I'd like to add to it, and whether it's correct or not, at least it's a perspective to consider, and that is that there was an adamancy amongst the folks who were involved at the ranch, that we had each other's backs, that if the government came after any of us individually, that we would rally to their support, that we were not going to allow the government to go after people because they were involved in helping other people, that we were not going to stand by and let it happen. And so I would like to think, whether it's true or not, that that was a little bit of the way it's supposed to be. When the people fear the government, there's tyranny. When the government fears the people, there's liberty. Maybe there was just a little bit of liberty for that period of time because the government was reluctant to stir the pot again.
Mark, can I pose a couple questions?
Of course.
Because I think by asking a couple questions, you can get to some answers really quick. Does anybody remember who the lead special agent in charge in Bunkerville was? We all know, right?
Dan.
It's Dan Love. Okay,
Dan full of love.
Who is the agent in charge in Oregon? Bretzing. Okay, and what do Bretzing and Dan Love have in common?
Landing Utah.
Bretzing and Dan Love worked a case in 2009 called Operation Cerberus in southern Utah, which led to the death of Dr. Red. What is Dan Love and Greg Bretzing doing together in southern Utah in 2009? And how is it possible that Dan Love becomes the lead agent in Bunkerville and Greg Bretzing becomes the lead agent in Malheur and is transferred to Oregon as the head of the FBI before anybody even thinks about Malheur? How's that possible? And to even find the connection of these two men, you have to dig into the Bretzing or into the red case. And when you get to the red case, you find this really strange stuff going on. But then you got to go back even farther than that, okay? You got to go all the way back into Waco, Ruby Ridge, and start to ask yourself, what in the world is the federal government doing, arming the National Park Service with automatic rifles, paying special operators to come and work for them, creating sniper teams? Because congressmen don't vote for things that don't make sense. And you can't go to Congress and say, hey, we'd like to create an army in the West so that we can kill people who rise up and stand for religious liberty. And so instead you say things like, look, we've got to protect these national treasures, blah, 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 blah. But then you got to go even deeper. So let me ask everybody a question. What age do we live in? Speaking from a worldly perspective, would you agree with me that we live in the information age? Would that be a fair thing to say? Now, in an era of big information, what is the most valuable weapon in the world? It's intelligence. And where do we store America's intelligence? Anybody know?
At the National Security Agency.
Nope. Bluffdale, Utah. Strangely
that's right.
enough.
Yeah, that's right. It's in
Yeah,
Utah.
we've decided to create a house of intelligence in Bluffdale, Utah. And it goes down into the ground to a depth most people can't even comprehend, uses an amount of water that most people can't comprehend. And we learned in Oregon in the discovery that the government was already employing an artificial intelligence to go after all of these defendants. And you got to start to ask yourself, where are they housing these things? How are they running these things? And so when Harry Reid, and I'm going to bounce around a little bit here, when Harry Reid gets up 4 days after Bunkerville starts and says this is domestic terrorism, it's a little bit interesting that he's the same guy that passed the very laws that made that terrorism and now needs other people to vote for massive budgets so that they can justify something. Well, this is now I'm going to become very hypothetical here, okay? Because if you try to explain everything from the perspective of a conspiracy, it tends to fall flat. But when you explain everything from the perspective of reasonable action that can be explained before Congress or protected in intelligence committees, right? Now you begin to theorize that maybe when Dick Cheney gets in front of the world and says, and he actually said this in an interview, we've realized that the entire 3 branches of government could go down at the same time and we would have no functioning government. And so under the Bush administration, he's bragging about this in his interview, Dick Cheney says they've created a backup branch of the government and they put it outside Washington, D.C. Well, where would you put that backup branch of government? You'd want to put it somewhere where all of your information was right at your fingertips so that you could wage modern informational intelligence war. And the epicenter of intelligence and information is Bluffdale, Utah, the center of the Rocky Mountain West. Now go back and tie together Ruby Ridge, Waco, Malheur, Bunkerville, Southern Utah, and these actions by people like Bretzing and Love that appear to be or pre-planned or foreordained almost in an uncanny way. And you start to realize that what the government might actually be protecting is something beyond most people's comprehension. And that's how they get Congress to give them massive amounts of money and how they can get BLM to employ the most well-paid operators in the United States in the Forest Service. And what you have happening is you have a group of men and women who stand up and because of the fraying of the edges of this plan, right? And they stand up and they say, hey, something has gone wrong here. And the government cannot afford to allow those types of things to expose why the government is turning the Rocky Mountain West into the hub of its military power. And you start to mess with that and they're going to kill you. And one of the things that Lavoy Finicum did and that these men did was something I think Ryan or Eric just mentioned, where they said, if you stand up, we will be with you. That's the dangerous thing these men did. Because the moment you bring to bear an organization of good men and women who will stand with other people who love liberty, guess what's going to happen? They're going to come get you. And that's why we found evidence that they had pre-planned and premeditated Lavoie's death. In fact, in the Astorita trial, one of the FBI agents testified that the trooper number 1, I think it was, or trooper number 2, had got onto the phone when Lavoie left and said, we are going to have to kill this guy, jumped in his car, followed him down, and shot him. And this comes on the heels, and this is, of course, why they didn't want the information relative to Bunkerville discussed in Oregon, was because they didn't want the lid coming off the top before they had the chance to send them all to jail. But we had evidence in Nevada that they had planned an officer-involved shooting, that it was in their briefings. That's one of the things that came out in Wooten letter number 2, I believe. And to this day, anyway, I'm starting to jump around too much now. As an attorney in the case, I cannot even read Wooten letter number 2. It is being held behind lock and key in the offices of the very attorneys who work for the government that were found guilty of outrageous prosecutorial misconduct. Now, why, right? You begin to ask yourself why. And what you get to is you get to a government conspiracy that's probably protecting a military facility in the heart of the Rocky Mountain West. I would say that's probably what's going on here. And that's why they're willing to kill people for it.
Episode 2 in the Nevada trials will bring out the Wooten membos. Actually, really working well. I better not say it out loud. So, Jeremiah, do we have any other? Okay, so we had Walter who had his hand up earlier. Walter, we'll let you have the last question. Walter, are you there still? Did he must have stepped off. Okay, so for the panelists, do you guys have any parting thoughts as we move into 23 and 24 and eventually the inevitable release of Nevada trials and the wrongful death suit?
I have a question.
Any last parting thoughts? Who is it?
I have a question.
Who is it?
Jason, hello?
Oh, there you are. Okay, go ahead. Go, Jason.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Morgan. Morgan, do you think the Ninth Appellate will ever give a ruling in my appeal? And what should we do if they don't?
I suspect with COVID, if my experience so far with COVID is correct, they have used COVID to basically prolong things almost indefinitely that they don't want to deal with. I'm not sure what the tenor of the Ninth Circuit is, but usually it leans a little bit more favorable to criminal defendants. Having said that, though, I'm not sure you meet the criteria for today's modern judicial review. You've got too much white privilege going on, Jason. So they may not, they may or they may not. I would say that if it were the 10th Circuit, I might have a little bit more to say, but I just am not familiar enough with the Ninth Circuit to say. I have a feeling personally that whenever a case goes from one judge, and your Oregon case, is the chief judge still in Monahan? Is that his name? Mossman, I mean. Is it still Mossman in Oregon? If it's not, you might have a better chance, but I suspect that there are phone calls that happen when something goes up, and I suspect that an appellate court calls the judge whose decision is in question, and they have a conversation. And depending on the level of respect between those two people on the phone will determine whether or not you get heard. the courts will vociferously deny that, but I don't believe for a second that they're not communicating. So if Mossman's gone, you've got a better chance. If Mossman is still there, am I getting the name right? Is it?
Yes.
Is that yeah. If he's still there, you're DOA, because he's going to call up and try and sink you. He's unilaterally been responsible for locking down that case more than any other judge, including Judge Brown. That guy's the bad actor in that case.
So any parting thoughts from the panelists besides the question from Jason before we let everybody go? Anybody? Going once? I'm just kidding. Well, we really appreciate you being a part of the event tonight, the premiere, and we look forward to having these conversations and driving them across the United States over the next 2 years. And we should be releasing episode 2, the Nevada trials, and episode 3, the wrongful death lawsuits, in 2024. So thank you all for participating. Thank you to our panelists for your contributions and ideas about the future, and to our audience from across the world. I mean, it was amazing. We had folks from everywhere, from Japan, Taiwan, etc. So thank you all for being a part of this premiere tonight. All right. Thank you. Thank you guys very much.